Okay. Alrighty, ready to get started?
Do I have to screen share?
Sharon, are you screen sharing, or Marissa, are you screen sharing?
I don't know. I'm a newbie at this, everyone. So please give me some grace as I do this. I don't know. Do you want to?
I can pull
Do
up the,
that?
if it's easier, I can pull it up. I can pull up the presentation and then,
Yes, please. Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Bear with me. How are we doing? Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see what you're presenting.
So at this point, let's see, I should do my slide, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sam, I thought you were sharing. That's why I didn't under,
No. I take care of the polls and breakout rooms, but I figured
Okay.
if you're speaking that you don't want me to wait on me to change the slide, but
Right,
I can share
okay.
if you want.
No, that's fine. So I just hit slide then to share, right? And go through each one?
If you go to the right where there's a little play button says slideshow.
Right. Then I don't have to set the timer. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. Perfect. Alrighty.
Let me move this camera out of the way.
Okay. Here we go.
All right, so before we begin, I'd like to, I'm sure this has been repeated to you before, but these 3 topics are heavy topics. And so I would like to invite everyone who wants to grab a drink, a snack, a blanket. Some people wrap themselves in a blanket. I want you to kind of just self-care and feel, comfortable, and like this is a comfortable space and environment to learn and to be able to talk and interact with everybody. Marissa and I ask that you keep your video on at all times unless you are driving and or your computer doesn't have a video. Technology is wonderful. It can be great, but then it has its hiccups. So if you get disconnected or accidentally bumped off, please come on back on. We'll invite you back in. If myself or Marissa gets bumped off, please be patient. One of us will take over until the other one hops back on, should it occur when one of us is presenting. These are some heavy topics. So if you need to walk away from your screen and take a few minutes to yourself or just turn everything off, please do that. I want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Go take a breather, go grab a drink, go outside real quick. If it's too much and you need to get off, go ahead and do that. And then you can just let myself or Sam or Marissa know, whoever's information you have on hand. So anyways, I guess I'll say next slide then. Yes. We're going to begin with trauma in a video. So if you click on it, I think it starts, or at least it started for me. It's not going to do it. What do you see, Marissa?
So it says, what is trauma? What is
I know, but
trauma?
you should be able to click on it and it should play.
Nothing's
I made it.
playing.
Did you well, I guess I uploaded it to the Google Doc that you sent me, and it might not have been attached on the new one. I can pull up. Do you know what channel it's from?
YouTube.
No, I know it's on YouTube, but
Oh.
like, what channel posted the video?
Of course not. that would be too
easy. Oh, okay. I think I have it.
It's like a minute and a half. It's short.
Yeah, okay, I see. It's from 3 years ago. Marissa, if you want to stop your screen sharing for a minute.
Sorry, everyone.
Individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances experienced by an individual as harmful or life-threatening. Trauma can impact every area of human functioning: physical, mental, behavioral, social, and spiritual. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study was one of the largest examinations of traumatic events in childhood and their impact on later life health and well-being. More than half of adults in the U.S. reported experiencing at least one traumatic event before the age of 18. An individual's experience of trauma increases the risk of mental illness, including depression, addiction, heart and liver disease, diabetes and asthma, suicide attempts, and ultimately an early death. But there is hope. Trauma is treatable. Addressing trauma is now the expectation, not the exception, not only in healthcare settings, but in our communities. At the National Council for Behavioral Health, we use trauma-informed approaches to create safe environments and support individuals in their healing journey. Our trainings have helped hundreds of individuals and communities across the country map out and operationalize a plan for delivering trauma-informed approaches. Let's implement trauma-informed approaches, not just in our homes, but in our work, our communities, and our everyday lives.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll go to the next slide. Okay, let me move this over so I can read what I'm doing. So tonight, I want to provide you with a broader understanding of what trauma and depression and suicide is. And starting off with different types of trauma, we're not going to be, diagnosing anyone or, telling them that they have one of, these five. That's, for, individuals who have training in this. So I'm just going to go over the different types of traumas that people may be experiencing when they call in to our crisis line. Not like you're going to know this right off the bat, but just giving you a better understanding of where they might be coming from might be a little helpful for you as you support them. So acute trauma is a tense distress in the immediate aftermath of a one-time event. And the reaction is of a short duration, such as like a car accident, physical or sexual assaults, or a sudden death of a loved one. There's more, but I just wanted to limit it to that. Chronic trauma is harmful events that are repeated and prolonged, and this can develop in responses from bullying, being neglected as a child or adolescent, even elders, and different forms of abuse such as emotional, physical, sexual, and domestic violence. Usually women and men who repeatedly go back to the same abusive relationship because they're not ready or circumstances doesn't allow them to leave, or circumstances makes them have to go back. That can be ongoing, and it takes a toll on it as well. There are some people who are survivors or victims of sexual assault who actually are 5 times greater on being sexually assaulted again. And in some cases will have multiple. So you may get somebody who calls in who's like, this is my 5th time. And the most recent one was 3 months ago, and I'm having a difficult time. Emotional, also emotional abuse. That has short-term and long-term effects, ranging from whether you're in infancy all the way to, elderly and mature adults. Complex trauma arises from experiencing repeated or multiple traumatic events from which there is no possibility of escape. So feeling trapped. And most often, again, somebody who has been kidnapped and held against their will, and a trauma has occurred, or ongoing domestic violence. There's lots of things that could happen. Or some people who are experiencing mental illness will also think, and in some cases can be, feeling trapped or feel like they can't escape. They're in their room, in their basement, etc. You'll get some interesting phone calls regarding that. They do happen. It could undermine a sense of safety of the world and others. So just going outside, some people can't step outside of that door. It could be interacting with others who remind them of their abuser. So they're triggered. So it isolates them. Hypervigilant. So being super anxious, super emotional, dramatic, over the top. It's because their fight or flight and freeze and fawn is ready to go. It's saying, my alarm is on. And it won't shut off because of repeated experiences. And then consistently checking their surroundings for the possibility of a threat. So they're always waiting for that something to happen. If I go out to the trash can and dump my garbage, if I go into the bathroom and switch on the light, if I put my feet down from getting out of bed, someone's underneath there. In some cases that could be true. In some cases that may not be, or they're replaying the experience. Secondary or vicarious trauma occurs from exposure to other people's suffering, and over time our risk for compassion fatigue. That includes doctors, first responders, advocates, myself as a therapist dealing with trauma day in and day out, could be firefighters. It could be anyone who is in the forefront of helping others, in which they avoid investing emotionally in other people in an attempt to protect themselves from experiencing distress. So if you find yourself being abrupt, or when you go to deliver something like, oh, I'm so sorry, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, it's night and day how you would deliver it. And that could be triggering to a person over the phone. You smiling, you watching your tone, those type of things go a long way when you're helping others. You find yourself bringing your clients home who you helped over the crisis line. Sometimes it can be very intense. Sometimes they can be very fun, and it could be very gratifying. And sometimes you bring them home, or that same call that comes in maybe weekly for you, that same theme, maybe sexual assault, a particular something in someone's sexual story, or domestic violence, a specific thing that occurs that you're like, yeah, right. Or I hear that every time someone calls in, you start becoming unsympathetic and not really listening and paying attention. That can happen over time. So if you notice that, definitely want to encourage you guys to reach out to us or a friend, or take a step back and take a break. Adverse childhood experiences. I work with a lot of children that I test with around this experience, but it covers a wide range of difficult situations, from children either directly facing violence, from shootings to domestic violence, to watching a family member be physically assaulted, or being just a witness. So just hearing it in the other room, or seeing it firsthand, trying to defend the abuser and the victim or survivor of what's going on. So while growing up, before they have developed effective coping skills. So most often, if a trauma, for example, has occurred when a child is 10 and they don't get the support and caregivers and support people that believe them, and they get like, oh, that didn't happen, you're making it up. And the trauma wasn't addressed, like, so how are you feeling? What's going on? Yeah, that was scary. Just an opportunity to process it ongoing. The likelihood when they have another event in their life, they are going to act like a 10-year-old at 18 and at 25 and at 30 and so on. If it's an underdeveloped coping skill. So they have to relearn these things all over again. So this in a nutshell are some of the very people who are going to call, who are usually acute trauma, the very first one. Normally that comes right off the bat when someone has been sexually assaulted, or even domestic violence, or maybe they witnessed someone getting hit by a car. That's the most common. And then the others follow, depending on what comes up for the person, their story, their situation. Next slide. All right, so short-term and long-term effects of trauma. So we have fun different compartments in our brain, just kind of give you a little rundown of how our brain works a little bit. The amygdala in the brain is responsible for detecting threats. So it's our alarm system, like a smoke alarm that we have in our buildings. And it sends out alert to multiple parts of our body systems to get us ready to defend, in which the nervous system jumps into action. So it releases adrenaline, noradrenaline, and stress hormones that prepare our body to fight, flight, freeze, and response. So you may get like a caller who calls in and who can't express himself fully, or you've got one who's overreactive and yelling at the top of their lungs, or someone who's going to go hide, or someone who's ready to fight. So someone who's experienced trauma, this is usually on all the time, like 95% of the time. And in some cases, it's always on for someone. And when it's on, a person's body, their mental being, their physical state, they're unable to relax. And so this has effects from anxiety to depression, to affecting their eating, affecting how they interact with others. It can take quite some time, depending on the circumstances and the type of support that they get, to relax their fight or flight freeze response. The short term of this part is fear, anxiety, shock, aggression, and anger are like all the normal responses to traumas, but often interferes in daily life function. So getting out of bed, taking a shower, avoiding wanting to do things with their family and friends. Maybe we'll call in sick constantly at work. They're like eating, what's that? I haven't eaten in 3 days. Or maybe they're not hydrating. They could lose their job, or have conflicts with family and friends, and it becomes to where they can't even function, do the most basic thing. Long-term effect, they may develop emotional disturbances such as extreme anxiety, anger, sadness, survival guilt, especially if there's been a car accident, shooting, or maybe a domestic violence situation where someone was killed. So why am I living? Why did I survive and the other person didn't? And then disassociation. So if I avoid that topic, or if I change the subject, or if I ignore you, this is common, and often most people will do it. They'll loop in their thoughts, and then they'll go back and forth and not wanting to talk about this. Inability to feel pleasure. So once they enjoyed, dancing, laughing, it could be, daily exercise. They now don't even know how to do that. They're just empty. Hypervigilance, so big reactions and emotions. So they talk really fast and they express themselves like I am right now with my arms. They are loud. People will call it obnoxious. They're very in your face, your personal space. They may have sleep issues. So being able to fall asleep, but then not stay asleep, or they just won't sleep at all. And then when they can sleep, they can't because they have to work or they have children. Poor or excessive eating habits. So that could look like I wake up at 5 a.m. and I have 5 cookies and 3 cups of coffee. Or it could be some people eat really healthy, but they eat lots of it, and it's called emotional eating. And so they'll overfill themselves. Also from that becomes eating disorders. So emotional eating or purging, binging. Physical pain. When people internalize trauma and they hold it in within and they don't, reach out for others, to others to get support, whether that's in therapy, a friend, calling our crisis line, people start to have physical body pain. So headaches, sore throats, stomach and back aches, arm and leg issues, a lot of feet issues over time, because, the body keeps the score. It like checks if you do not, process things and get help and change things. The body starts to remind you that like, hey, you're not doing so good after all. And believe it or not, this comes from experiences with trauma. Conflicts with personal or professional relationships. So constantly arguing with staff, not seeing eye to eye, agreeing to disagree, but not doing that like it's my way or the highway. Getting suspended, written up, fired, maybe not even be able to hold down a job, become homeless. Conflicts within personal relationship. Maybe you start to separate, you start sleeping in the different room as your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner. Maybe, your friends stop hanging out with you because you're just too much for them, or they just don't get it every time they try to interact with you. So people start to, interact with you and call you and hang out with you. And then a decreased sense of self-worth. So, just not valuing yourself and not feeling good about yourself. Trauma can take big and little tolls on a person, and everyone's reaction and dealing with things are different. So each time someone calls in on the crisis line, it's always going to be different. Maybe the theme is the same, but the reaction and how that person has been affected by it is more than likely going to be different. I mean, even though maybe they have some anxiety or depression. Next slide. So this is traumatic events that affect children and adults. So this is just a few. There are more than just this. So starting with grief and loss, that can be anything from losing of a child, a parent, a friend. That could be ending of a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, a romantic relationship. It could be you having to abruptly leave your home in a domestic violence situation when you're fleeing, or grief and loss over someone took something from me intimately when you were sexually assaulted. So there's grief and loss in that. Physical and emotional or sexual abuse. This can occur for anyone, adults, children, at any time in their life. We can't avoid trauma. It's going to happen. It could be anything from stubbing your toe to getting your fingers stuck in the door. Those are not fun. So those are just little traumas, but that could be big to me or someone else. Intergenerational culture or historical trauma. So that's when like your grandparents pass on behaviors of domestic violence, for example, and then to your parents, and then from your parents, it goes to you, for example. It only takes one person to put an end to a stop to it with some help. The next one is medical interventions, people who go in for surgeries, have babies, maybe shots, maybe they have IVs, things that occur that don't go accordingly, or they don't know enough about, can be traumatic. Accidents or natural disasters. So car accidents, we see them, not maybe everyone sees them daily or weekly, but we hear it on the news and on the radio. We see it from a car accident to someone getting hit, natural disasters, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, etc. And then war and other forms of violence. In some of our towns and cities, it happens daily, weekly, monthly. Right now, we have a war going on that can be very scary to all of us, including our children who don't have an understanding of like what's going on, what can we do, feeling hopeless. And then childhood abuse or neglect. There are some callers who are going to call on the crisis line. They are 10, 12, 13, sometimes older. They will share, I have a friend, and then from them saying, I want to help my friend, it ends up being them. And there are some ways that they can go about getting help without notifying their parents. Because in some cases, if their parents were to find out they were talking to us on the crisis line, or you sent them to me for therapy, it could endanger them more and cause excessive abuse at home. So there are ways that they can come for support as long as they understand the therapy part and get free services from us. Next slide. There are a lot of misconceptions about trauma. I could have went on 4, 5, 6 pages on this. I pulled from research that I've read that professors have shared with me. I've also pulled things that I've heard people say on the phone to me when I occasionally answer the crisis line. So I have heard a lot, often in my counseling rooms with clients or in my domestic violence support groups that I run with another counselor. Trauma is a life sentence. So like my life is ruined. I will never be happy again. People who have trauma backgrounds of domestic violence, sexual assault, physical assault traumas, sexual abuse as a child, molestation, etc. Some people honestly believe that they are ruined, that they will not be good as a friend, as a wife, as a husband, that they're just never going to be happy. They're always going to be depressed. They're always going to be anxious. But it's possible to not make trauma a life sentence. And that's by getting support and building your support system. And there's other dynamics to that. But there is hope. It's not ruined. And there are ways that you can navigate that so that they can change their belief system on this and reframe it differently. The next one is you'll only experience trauma after a life-threatening event. It's not true. It comes in all forms, small and big events. No one is excluded from it. So they don't care if you're rich or poor. They don't care the color of your skin. They don't care the neighborhood that you live in. And events occur differently. It could be hitting your head. It could be, tripping and falling and breaking your leg. It could be a story that someone shared, maybe a movie that you watched. So it varies for people. Post-traumatic stress is a disorder. It is a disorder. It's often overdiagnosed, but I won't get into that, but you'll probably hear it a lot. You probably see it, and you see it every time you turn around. It's in a magazine, it's on the radio. It's a result of being emotionally and physically hurt by the traumatic event. It only becomes a disorder after 6 months of symptoms. So often people will call in on the crisis line and they're like, I have post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. I know it for sure. I looked it up in the DSM-5 book, which is the book that I diagnosed with, and they'll get online and they'll self-diagnose us. Anyone can get online. There's good stuff and bad stuff. We all know that. But there's more to PTSD than just that. But their event is similar to PTSD, but there's criteria for it. So in that case, I just listen because they may very well have it, but haven't been diagnosed with it yet. So it's very much a disorder, but it's a result of that. I also hear if you're strong, you can make it through your trauma by yourself. And if you're weak, you can't do it. So you've got to be strong, always got to be strong. And you don't have to do it alone, which I just realized I had to have a typo there. Sorry, everyone. The more support you have, the better off you are at. So your support system, from therapy to your physician, to an advocate, to the crisis line, to your teacher, to your neighbor, whatever that looks like. Everyone's support system is going to look different. The more support you have, the better outcomes you have in recovering and being able to interact with daily life and with others. The less factors that you have, the less support you have, the more difficulties you're going to experience. So I encourage, and you are more than welcome when someone calls in on the crisis line, to let them know that you don't have to do this by yourself. I'm here tonight with you, or I'm here this morning, thank you for calling type thing to help. And then the last one is nothing good ever comes from a traumatic event. You might not be able to recap something beneficial out of the sorrow, such as healing or growth. I can vouch firsthand that good things come out of traumatic events. For some people, that sounds absurd. That can't possibly happen. I have clients that meet their goals and graduate and go on into school, never thought they could do it because of the traumatic event, go on to be parents, never thought they could do because of the injury that occurred during a sexual assault or a domestic violence situation. And even doing things within our organization years down the line, or going out and starting an organization or support group for others because of their experience. So wonderful things actually do come out of it. Next slide. All right. I think we are a little bit ahead. Would we like to take a break now?
Does
Like a
anyone
10-minute
have any
break?
questions for Sharon
I
on
was
anything?
just going to ask, but I also wanted to, I know I said a lot in a short period of time, and I was going to open it up. Is there any questions that you have, or anything that has come up for you that you'd like to share?
I know, for me, I grew up in a house where there was some emotional and verbal abuse, and it was like very like we just never knew, right, what the mood was going to be, or like there was like a lot of walking on eggshell feelings. And now that I've been out of that house for longer than I lived there at this point. But after I've done my own like healing work and through life and things, and now reflecting back, realizing what that did to my nervous system and how long, I mean, it's still very heightened, like to this day, and like sensitive. And it took so many years to connect that because it wasn't that bad, like there wasn't anything, there was no like interventions happening or like physical violence, or it was easy to downplay it. But I think we don't really give, I don't know how to word it, but think of emotional and verbal abuse as something that can really affect how we show up in the world and respond and react to the world around us and the people around us. Like I was just so like hyped all the time, like ready to throw down and like fight anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I just thought like, this is just my personality. I'm like my dad. And really it was like, oh no, I'm actually not a violent person. I'm like, I was in that fight or flight response. And my sister though is like the total opposite. Like she goes into freeze, like shutdown mode, and has found herself in various relationships where that's the same pattern. So it's just really interesting how trauma really shows up for everybody and how it can be hard to even admit to yourself that there's trauma there to look at. So that's my share.
I also think for domestic violence, most often when people call in, they're like, it's just a little verbal or a little emotional. And then as they start talking, they're like, no, I think it was physical at some point, but it only happens far in between. So I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
Or it wasn't physical or emotional. He just isolated me or she isolated me and put me on financial allowance or those type of things. And people don't realize it's so broad, domestic violence. And even for sexual assault, for example, everyone's experience is different. Some people, some people are beat up with it, right? Whereas some people aren't. In like with domestic violence, it's interchangeable. And so the fight or flight or freeze is very tricky. For some people, it's a lifetime experience for them where they always have to work on it daily. For some, they can use some coping skills and they go to therapy and things like that, but understanding what that means to fight, flight, freeze. And there's a new one called fawn. And so they keep adding stuff and trying to keep on top of it. But all those things are protective factors. So when someone calls in and said, I couldn't move, I physically couldn't move. I just like watched myself like I was watching a movie. Your body's actually trying to protect yourself. And so, often people will feel shame or guilt for that, but that's what your body's doing. It's trying to protect you. And so your brain is like, oh, I'm going to do this for you because this is what you need. And in that moment, your body is actually taking care of yourself, or you're thinking to flee or to hide to get safe. That's okay too. And some people are like, but I left so-and-so. That's okay. It's okay. And then you just come back to that. Yeah, everyone's response is different. And realizing that like, that comes from the verbal abuse or from hearing it all the time. You may not visually see it. So yeah, it varies. Thank you for sharing that.
I was going to add something too, Elizabeth. I think a lot of times if we don't physically see the abuse when we're going through it, it's verbal or emotional. And then what we do is we compare ourselves to others, like more extreme cases, right? Whether it's our friends, those around us, what we read. And then we basically put away with what we're going through, right? And then sometimes we compare ourselves to others, like your sister acted a particular way than how you handled it. Where we shouldn't compare our pain with each other's, because a lot of times if we don't, then we don't work on our own, or we don't feel that our feelings are as valid or what we went through compared to others. So it's good that you're on this healing journey. But we always should realize, even too with callers, that when they do call in, it might not seem as much as a big issue for them to call, or even if they might know it is because they're reaching out to you. So when we do get callers, we should show, that's a great big step, that you took calling us, or, you might not think it's something small, but, we compliment you, we're here to support you. So make them feel good that they're able to verbalize and to reach out for help. Because it does take a lot, to ask for help, especially from a stranger, they don't know us, they just know that we're here to support them in whatever way it is. But
everyone's
it's tricky when you,
Sorry.
that's okay. That's okay. Were you gonna say, Sharon?
No, and everyone's different too, right? So her sister handled it one way, I'm going to handle it another. She handled it, you handle it, right? So it's, everyone's experiences is different. It's okay that I acted outrageous to one person, right? Just over the top, hyper vigilant. Maybe you withdraw, Marissa, right? And you're kind of just sulky, subtle about things. And so how come I can't be like you? We definitely don't want to do that for sure.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
Sharon, do you run into your house? You're there so fast.
Do I run
actually
into my
ran.
house?
No, Sharon looks like she ran. She's out of the car now. She's in front of the camera.
Yes, I'm
Oh.
back in my house and back on Zoom.
Great.
So thank you.
Great. So we're ahead of the game about 15 minutes. Would you, ladies and gents, like to take a break? Or do you want to keep going right into the next topic of depression?
It's been about an hour, so why don't we come back at 7:35?
7:35 it is. Thank you.
Sharon, you spent your break reading my email, right?
I started to and then I stopped.
I was being sarcastic, but I'm glad you got a chance to look at it.
I can definitely going to be reaching out tomorrow.
Perfect. I have some theories.
We can talk. I've got like 4 clients tomorrow, but we can talk.
Okay. We'll put our degrees to work.
For sure. One head, 2 heads are better than one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, welcome back. Is everyone here? Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of. Quick shoving a bite in your mouth. I did. Just had food delivered real quick. Okay. It's been a long day. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is depression. Let me share my screen. Okay. Let's see, move this out of the way. Perfect. Okay. So depression, it's a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. It causes feelings of sadness and or of loss of interest in activities that you once enjoyed. It can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can decrease your ability to function at work and at home. But fortunately, it is manageable and treatable. Now, statistics say that 1 out of 6 of us as adults, sometime in our life, between the ages of 45 to 65-year-old, we will experience depression at some point. There could also be probably most times 4 to 5 episodes during that time. Some could be more severe than others. So instead of just making this a presentation right now, I would rather prefer if we could have more of a conversational. Let me pull this in front of me. I have 2 screens, so I'm trying to look at you guys at the same time. If we could make this more conversational than me just talking. So we talked about what depression is, and pretty much I can guarantee everyone here has heard of depression. But what are some symptoms that either you've experienced or those close to you have experienced that you know are symptoms of depression? Elizabeth, do you want to share? Should I call, is it not okay to call on people? When I do presentations, usually I always call on people because I know sometimes I'll just sit there and I'm just, everyone will tell you I'm very direct. I'm very direct director, but I'm very direct.
Yeah, I was
So
actually
if you feel
gonna
uncomfortable,
unmute myself
Okay.
anyway, so.
okay, great, perfect.
Yeah, so after I had my son, I didn't really know at the time, but looking back now, I definitely know that I had pretty bad postpartum depression. And I just remember, and it's like, right, different for everybody, but for me, I just remember like feeling just this like sense of like misery every day, like just being like, why don't I just, nothing made me feel very happy. And but it was weird because at the same time I loved my family. I loved my son. He was a super hard baby, but like I never necessarily, wanted to, I never had suicidal thoughts, but I also was just like, I shouldn't be a mom. Like I'm really bad at this. Like everything just felt really hard and bad and not good. So that was my personal experience with that, which, once that, looking back on my life, I think there were definitely periods of time where I was depressed, but again, like I didn't have the awareness or the support or the tools to really understand like how I could have helped myself or that I could have talked about it to someone, because I just thought it was, I don't know, regular, normal. Everybody feels like this. So.
Well, if I can say anything, one is I really appreciate that you sharing with the group. You know, it takes a lot of guts to share. But if you look at the first bullet point is, you know, depression is common, but it can also be a medical illness. And you just shared that you just had a baby. So hormones, everything, you know, all the chemicals are not where they maybe were, you know, when you envision having children, you know, whether it's, my kids say tummy mom, I adopted my children, so like tummy mommies and then forever mommies. But regardless, when you have those emotions that, you know, when you think that this is going to be a certain way and then it happens, you know, it's like, what's wrong? You know,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry that no one was there to support or explain it to you that at that point, like it says, it could be a medical illness. You know, everything could have been off balance. But you got through it. And like the last, you know, it says it's manageable and it's treatable. So appreciate you sharing, you know, and that you were able to get through. And that's something, you know, you can use to be able to support sometimes, you know, if there are women, you know, we don't want to, and Sharon, I know she said this in the beginning, and we have to keep reiterating that we don't provide, not at any point, you know, when we take on the crisis line, do we diagnose or give out prognosis? And Tri-Valley Haven, that's not what we do either. We provide crisis counseling. So we always have to remember that as well. Clients or callers might come to us, like Sharon had said, you know, that they've been diagnosed with, you know, whether it's PTSD or, you know, anxiety disorder or what the case may be, bipolarism, but, you know, we're just here to listen, to try to get them back to baseline so that we're able to function. If not, you know, put them in the correct way to get them so that they'll get the help and the support they need. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Appreciate
no
that.
problem. I just realized that talking about it just makes it feel less, I don't know, heavy, normalizes it a little bit, you know? So, yeah. And I know for me, in my family, I had a family member who did die from suicide. And that was something that my dad especially was like almost paranoid about. So it felt unsafe to kind of like approach that subject with my parents, because I knew that they would like jump to an extreme or be like, then I would have to take care of their response to it. So yeah, just kind of adding that on top is like, luckily I had a good doctor and she talked to me about it, but you know, sometimes there's just multiple layers as to why it's not brought up.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we have Sharon and Max tag team. So in some of the clients that you've been working with, what are some of the symptoms that you've seen of depression?
Max, you want to go first?
Clients that I'm working with, symptoms of depression. I mean, most of my clients are over the phone, so it's not as easy to kind of pick up on sometimes. The conversations that I have are very, you know, forthright and to the point based on who I am. I could talk a little bit about my own depression if that is more helpful.
It's up to you, you know, it's however you feel comfortable.
Just for the sake of providing something to the conversation. Yeah, I've dealt with depression based starting with bullying in elementary and middle school, and it's kind of been like at a stable point for the last, sorry, I'm doing math, 16 to 18 years. So it's just something I've kind of managed, you know, maybe in the not the most healthy way, but a lot of times it's, you know, it is just lack of interest or, you know, a feeling of just trying to get through the day to start the next day, and then the next, you know, it's just like a constant survival thing, not like, you know, at the risk of suicide necessarily, but just like not an interest in anything. It's just trying to pass time, you know, to get through one day to another, even though there's no kind of end goal in mind. It's just sort of like, all right, just let's just get through it, and then tomorrow we'll get through it, and tomorrow we'll get through it, or the next day we'll get through it, or whatever. So, you know, it's difficult, but it like you said, it's manageable and easier to treat for some than others. But you know, it's all kind of a process.
May I ask you a question, Max?
Of course you can.
So, thank you. So you brought up bullying, right? And part of the prevention programs we do is we go into, those of you that don't know, in the Tri-Valley area, we go into the middle and the high school, 7th and 9th grade. We talk about relationships and dating violence and such, but a component of it is actually bullying. There are a lot of kids, that are being bullied at school, whether it's unwanted touch, whether it's verbal, emotional abuse. It's just bullying. So, Max, what would you, or how would you handle, or what advice or experiences would you share with the group here that if there was a caller, there was, a teenager calling about being bullied, how would you approach that conversation? Or how would you be able to help them feel supported?
I mean, my own personal, I probably wouldn't get into personals, right? That's not
Which
really
is
what we're
great.
here for.
Right. Right.
In my own personal experience, I, you know, didn't solve it necessarily, right? You don't solve bullying, sort of. It doesn't just
Mhm.
go away. The people don't just disappear. It
Right.
was just sort of my reaction to it, right? It's a lot of it's how you kind of at least outwardly react to things. I think people, especially, and you'll see it even more so in your adulthood on the internet or something. If you spend a lot of time on the internet, it's a lot about how you react to things. And if you give people an ability to react, you give them the satisfaction of getting a reaction out of you, then, you're kind of feeding it in unintentionally, obviously, because it's natural to react to things that are negative, but, you know, you're unintentionally kind of encouraging more of the same. So I would probably, without getting into my own situation, because that's sort of how I at some point I just didn't care anymore. I was just like, whatever, just say whatever you want. Don't just I'm not gonna engage. And at some point it just kind of went away on its own. Um,
Mhm.
and so I would probably share, more vaguely a similar situation, or at least, sort of my own 2 cents into the situation, just as a kind of a not a solution because it's not one
Right.
size fits all, but just sort of go about it in
Making
that
them
way.
feel more supported. Mhm.
Yeah, but
Right.
then of course still validate them, because it's a lot of times that then kind of comes from within, at some point you start to potentially believe what other people are saying, or, even if they're trying to be you're trying to be charitable, which I often try to be charitable to negative criticism, at least sort of like, okay, let's try to find where I can make some common ground out of this, conversation, or this, you know, these jokes or whatever it is, then there's a fine line between that and then starting to buy into it yourself. So
Right. Right. Well, thank you, Max. I appreciate that. And you raised a couple good points as it adheres to that, we're not here to share, like you said, and that's something that we have to watch. And I don't know if you've already gone into boundaries, if that was part of the cohort this time, or maybe it hasn't come up yet. But it's difficult when we get callers, especially when we've gone through some of those similar situations, and we know what's helped us, and it's like, how do we give advice, or how do we give support without saying, I know what you're going through, I know what you've been through. And it's tricky. And I know a little bit later on tonight, we're going to go through some crisis line scenarios, but the end of your hope, this entire winter cohort training, you're actually hopefully, as long as everything's safe, you folks will all be coming in and we'll be practicing scenarios. So you'll actually get to use all the amazing skills and the support, the information that you've retained and that you've learned during all of these trainings. So does anybody want to share anything else before okay. Hi, Sharon.
I wanted to share that I think that, I've gone in and out of it, out of depression, depending on, what the situation was, because I lost parents, both my parents. But I think one of the first time that I really experienced it was leaving the country and being an immigrant. Because, when you don't know anybody other than I'm married to a non-Indian, and he was living in the US. And so this is where I ended up. And, it's very hard because I was not just trying to retain the culture and the person that I was, leaving the country, but I was also married to somebody who's from another community. He didn't grow up here
Mm.
either. He's an Afghan. And so it was getting used to his culture and his ways of doing things. And then I was navigating a third culture, which was being in the US. And so it
Right.
was a really, really difficult situation. And, you know, a lot of times people don't realize you feel helpless and you feel angry because, you know, when you apply for a job, you need to provide a reference and you're new to the country. Who are you going to provide? You know, I mean, you're not going to provide your brother-in-law or your husband. But it's a really, you know, so whenever I deal with immigrants, you know, women in particular, I feel it. It comes back, you know, like even though I spoke English and I grew up attending convent schools, you know, had nuns from all over the world teaching us. I know I speak with a different accent and over time, maybe the pace or however I say words may have changed. But it was hard when folks on the phone, when you're even calling to apply or you're calling to ask questions, they would hang up. They didn't have time to kind of accommodate your accent or your voice. And that was awful. It was like you feel like you're not
Absolutely.
welcome. Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely.
It was really hard because you start doubting yourself, and then even things like I grew up in India. I grew up in a culture where yes, there's inequality in many ways, not some, but we were all Indian. And then you come to a country where you're told this is democratic and everybody's equal, but then you find out you're a person of color and you have to laugh about that. And you go, well, I don't know anybody who's colorless, so everybody's a person of color, But the things that you're navigating that are difficult.
True. I think living in the Bay Area, I think we live in a bubble. I mean, maybe because I'm from the East Coast, I'm from Philly, so it's really different being out here. And I feel like a lot of times we forget. I mean, there's a lot more diversity that's needed, but there's a lot more than other parts of the country. And I've lived overseas as well. So I think a lot of times people forget, like you said, and what everyone's struggles are, especially being an immigrant. I think they forget.
And it's
Thank
hard when
you.
you lose parents, Marissa, because you're not there. I mean, by the time you fly home, you can't have the family waiting on a funeral. By the time you're able to, because there's a time frame involved from airport to
Right.
airport. So there's a lot of loss when you're an immigrant.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yes, Sharon?
I just want to jump in just two perspectives as a mom of two boys, seeing depression and with one of them was always happy-go-lucky, very difficult to pinpoint until one day he fell apart and was like laying on the end of my bed going, I'm sad, I'm miserable, this sucks. So that was difficult to know this whole time, being involved in all his activities from sports to a relationship ended, first relationship, and he just fell apart and he wasn't able to kind of get back on the saddle until he just came to me and was like, yikes, I need help. And so I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, letting him know that you don't always have to be happy, but that's his characteristic and how he rolls. And then on the flip side of that, being a therapist, I see it in different ways. I see it in someone's appearance. So disheveled hair in their eyes, looking down, giggles, over the top expression, speaking super loud, being very aggressive in my face, to pajamas or a bathing suit with shorts, to prom dresses. So that's one part of it. I see people who are happy and the last 3 minutes of their 50-minute session fall apart and say, by the way, I'm going to walk out this door and you're probably not going to see me again. That's difficult. I see moms who have postpartum depression. I see gentlemen that are abused. And so I see sadness. I see anger. I see, you can see in their appearance that they are not eating, that they're extremely thin. So I see it in many different ways. Sometimes it's just hard to pinpoint, like, you know, when you want to put something, like you can't put your finger on it quite. So I see it in many different ways.
But on the flip side, there's a lot of folks that you don't see it, you know, they are suffering with depression. You know, everything does look okay. They're well kept together. That we just have to remember, you know, when individuals calling the crisis line and they're letting you know that they're depressed, you know, they're looking for you to give some type of comfort. You know, and we'll talk about suicide a little bit later, but if we're just talking about depression and sadness, they're calling, you know, maybe for you to validate their feelings, or not necessarily saying, you know, I understand, because we don't understand what they're going through, but I hear you, I'm listening. Those types of, you know, really using the active listening when someone is calling, and sometimes just silence, just sitting there and just, that's all they need. You know, maybe they've been holding it in, and the depression still might be there, but maybe you're the only person that they have to at this point, or that they've held in to be able to talk to about what their true feelings are. Okay, so talked about feeling sad, loss of interest or pleasure in activities, you know, weight loss or weight gain, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy or increased fatigue, feeling worthless or guilty, increase in purposeless physical activity, inability to sit still, as I can see, pacing, slowed movement or speech, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, and thoughts of death or suicide, which obviously, if we feel a caller is calling us and they are going to commit suicide, at that point, we want to make sure they're safe, and we'll go into that. And that would be something out of the scope and the realm of what we do. And that's where 911 would need to be called. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. So risk factors for depression is biochemistry. So certain chemicals in the brain can contribute to symptoms of depression. Genetics, you know, can run in families. Personality, someone with low self-esteem, you know, who gets easily overwhelmed by stress, are generally pessimistic. They appear to be more likely to experience depression. You know, it could be situational as well. Environmental factors, you know, exposure to violence, neglect, abuse, poverty, even what's going on right now. I mean, for myself, I wake up 3 or 4 times a night. I'm always looking at the news, you know, in regards to what's going on in Russia and just in Ukraine. And I have friends from both, you know, both regions, and it's just tough, you know. I can't imagine what they're going through and what they're feeling. And if I try to, I just can't. So even situations like that, like even during COVID, the numbers in depression, you know, and they didn't even have enough therapists, you know, to even support or to even see, you know, clients or patients because depression was so high during these times, you know, that we're all going through. Does anyone else have questions, comments, anything they want to share? Concerns if someone was to call, if you were going to get a caller that's expressing to you that they're very depressed, where they might find difficulties in being able to support that individual.
Like worst case scenarios or best case scenarios.
Well, let's put it out there. If someone calls you and says they're very depressed, they just can't stop crying. They want someone to talk to. Because it happens.
I mean, I would assume that you would want to refer them to a therapist, right?
What would you do, Chris? So Christine, personally, what would you do? How would you handle it? So if someone calls you and says, I'm so depressed right now. I just want somebody, you know, I just am so sad. You know.
Maybe, well, have them talk a little bit, right? Can you hear me? Is there like weird?
Oh, no, I can definitely hear you.
Okay, sorry. I had like some I don't know, some sound back there. I would have them explain, like tell their story. Try and, just listen, say, we're here for you. Maybe we can suggest, would it help to have, to talk to one of our counselors, they're, give information on how to do that. But mostly I would think as far as for me, I would have to just listen and see if there's anything that I could help them with. Mainly, I mean, I guess it would be a referral to a therapist, possibly.
Okay. But also you're a crisis count, so you're providing you're handling the crisis line. So yes, we're going to get them aftercare, whether it's a counselor, whether it's an advocate, whether, when groups start. But at that moment they're calling, they want someone to talk to. So
Yeah.
think of it that way.
Yeah, I would be like, well, what can you tell me what's going on?
Good.
Kind of a
Good.
start, and then just
Good.
see how
Good.
it progresses, I guess.
Well, good, because you're helping to get back to being, a little grounded. No, we're not talking about suicide. Well, we are talking about suicide next, but at this point, if they're calling that they're very sad and depressed, you kind of want to get them familiar because, right now they're only seeing maybe one way. So if there's something that you can share, so that's good. That's good. Who else? I haven't heard. Anson, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. I haven't gotten to virtually meet you yet, so I only can go off on your screen. So how would you, if you had a caller, Anson, let you know they just don't feel like going to work anymore, they're so overwhelmed with their kids. They've just had it. They're just so sad about it. How would you approach a caller like that based upon what you've learned so far?
Yeah, for me, dealing with depression, I really try and emphasize like routines for basic needs because it's a temporary situation, right? It is something that will change over time if you ride it out. So the goal is to meet the minimum functioning necessary until you get to that point, which can be really hard when like getting out of bed is a challenge. So it's not as helpful when you're already in the hole, but setting up habits that you can fall back on are pretty helpful. But if someone is already in that place, then I think trying to help them set up a minimal schedule to get through the day and try and remind them that this is temporary. It doesn't feel like it. You can't feel hope. You can't see any light on the end of the tunnel, but it is a temporary situation, a chemical situation. And you just got to ride it out sometimes, unfortunately.
So twofold to that, some of that is going to be very helpful. But one thing I think we have to remind ourselves is that those of us that are taking the crisis line is that we're trying to instantly, we're trying to help that situation right there, right? So you folks are going to be equipped with towards the end of your cohort where we're going to give you as many resources as possible. I'll make sure that you have that. We just had a refresher course that I did for when crisis calls come through. So if we can't provide those services right away, and Anson, you could share with the individual. So we want to get them, kind of to the next step, and being heard and, giving them, the skills that we know and knowing that you guys, all of you, and I hate saying you guys, but you folks, I say folks, just because where I grew up, you folks will have the tools that you need. And if you still feel like you need to be supported by those of us that have been here, we're just in this field for a while, that we're here for you. And there's no exact correct answer, right? We just have to know that we're not here, and I know you're going to keep hearing me reiterate this, and I reiterate to my team as well. That we're not here to diagnose, and we're not here to provide prognosis, and we are crisis counseling. We're providing crisis counseling, and it's a crisis line. And this is just important for some of these areas to see that when we have these callers, Anson, like you shared, maybe they had like a crummy, they lost their job this week, or, they were supposed to have a promotion, or what the case may be. So as a here's to that, a schedule would be great, get your butt up the next day, take a shower, get dressed, work out, go look on LinkedIn, update your, it could work something like that. Or, somebody routine, they might not be like, what does that even mean? I haven't had a routine. So that case, we might want to make sure that they're grounded just for tonight or just for today, whenever you're doing the crisis line, till we can get them to the next step. So, okay. Anyone else?
I feel like a
No.
lot of times, well, I guess I shouldn't say that for myself. That's the only thing I could say for sure, is that with depression, even if they're just moments or days of depressed feelings or depression, right? It just feels so lonely. And I think that really compounds on top and like snowballs a lot of what you're already feeling. And it's like the isolation feeling. You could be around. I was never actually alone that often physically. Well, never, because I had my kid with me, whether or not anyone else is with me. But it just felt all the time like no one understands, no one cares, I have no one to talk to, that kind of thing. So, for me, just thinking of what maybe I would have needed in that moment would just literally be someone on the line, like to just not be by myself and to just let them know, like, I'm here, I'm not hanging up the phone. Like, if you want to just cry it out, like, this is a safe space to do that. And if you want to talk, I'm ready to listen. Because I think there can also, sometimes there's so much going on in someone's life. It's like, tell me what's going on. And they're like, so much stuff, and they can't even verbalize because it's just so overwhelming. So letting them kind of get that out, I think, because for me, I never cried about it. I never let myself get to that point, and it probably would have been very helpful.
I've gotten people who will just be like, can you just stay on the phone, knowing that I can hear? And so I'll put a little music in the background just so that they can hear and give them the space to be quiet. And then you start to hear them start crying, or in some cases they'll say a word or two, and then eventually that word or two turns into more.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Music.
Because you're going when someone's talking, right? And if you're quiet, they're like, hey, you still there? And you're like, oh gosh, I'm still listening to you, right? You get caught up in the moment that you're like, oh gosh, you're right, I didn't go right? And they're like, are you still there? And so having that music when someone can't talk and needs like 5-10 minutes to process before they can say those few first words, and then they start rolling and saying more and doing more. It's just nice to kind of have, so they know that you're there.
Yeah.
Not to say you have to do that, but that's what I've done.
I think it's a great tip.
I used to work on, I worked on a 24/7 line, and it wasn't necessarily a crisis line. So we got callers calling with all sorts of needs, and we'd have people that would sound very depressed. We did have some suicidal callers. And so I think one of the things I would always say is, I'm sorry to hear you're feeling this way. What's going on? Can you share? And sometimes it's something that there are times when they, maybe they don't feel like anything's wrong, and they'll downplay it and say, well, I'm fine. It's just a bad day, or it's just something. And you say, well, you've been carrying a lot, and in case you want any kind of referrals for groups or individual, we have that, and I can offer it to you. And you'd be surprised. I couldn't tell you how many times people did accept. But we also had folks whose problems were not as big as they had made them out to be. Like, we had one lady who had an elderly lady who had moved from out of state, and her cell phone bills for calling her friends back out of state was so high that their child had cut off that cell phone, and she was very angry and very upset and very tearful. And it sounded initially like she was suicidal. And then when I said, well, there are lots of plans now, could you have a conversation with your daughter and talk to her about that? And she was like, oh yeah, and it was like, there was this light, and it was nothing to do with the suicidal situation. It was just feeling very lonely and isolated from everybody and everything she'd known. Yeah.
Soothing voices. I know we don't really go into like voices, but we're talking about listening, and sometimes it's our tone and not oversharing, and just being there and using the same calm, quiet. I mean, those of us that have kids, we know, like, we match their, I know with my kids, if I match, especially my daughter, it's oof. But if I just talk to her like this, then most times she'll just stop being spicy. So can we take 10 minutes? Come back. What time is it?
8:12,
Okay.
or at least that's what my computer says.
Yeah, so let's take 10, and I'll see you folks back in 10 minutes.
Where's my thing?
Did you get a chance to eat, Sharon?
I'm snacking. I have to admit, you all, I have been very nervous. This is my first time presenting, so appreciate everyone.
I was just going to say thank you for the breaks because I heated food on my first break and I was kind of trying to eat because I missed lunch, thinking I'd grab it on my commute and I wasn't able to. So
So go grab it. You can
I
eat it
did.
now.
I ate macaroni and cheese. I heated it up and I ate it quick. So I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Comfort food.
I have snacks and dinner, but I'm like, snacks work. We're good.
Mhm. Ooh.
Thank God for Trader Joe's, right?
They're pretty good. Hey, Christine, I have to say, I love your bedroom setup. It's very cozy and it like, I don't know, it makes me happy. And when I saw it, because I was nervous and I was still a little nervous, I was like, oh, it just kind of like made me relax a little bit. I was like, oh, that looks just fun and comfortable and peaceful.
Well, it is actually not my bedroom. It's my older daughter's. So
Oh, she has a good taste.
she's in college. So this is our, my little room now.
Love it. It's cute.
Thank you. I'll have to tell her that she's missing her room. She comes home for spring break in 2 weeks. And we haven't seen her
Aw.
since January. So I'm like, can't wait to see her.
oh.
That will
Yeah.
be fun. You have to hang out on that bed. Have
Yeah.
girl talk.
So Christine's heard from two Sharons how nice that room is, huh, Christine?
Sharon,
Yes.
Sharon counselor and Sharon linkages.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. And this is the most I've ever spent in this room because usually, when she's home, she doesn't want me in this room. So
She's like, Mom, gosh.
yeah. So, oh, fun.
Are we all back? So I have to say, this word suicide used to be very scary to me until I started working with clients in 2015. But I never had a client who expressed suicidal tendencies or thoughts until I came to Tri-Valley Haven in 2019. And the counseling team were getting left and right some of this. And I was like, whew, thank goodness. Because I was like, to have somebody's life in my hands and not know how to help them because I was new and didn't have the tools in this area. Little did I know my worldly experience, my schooling, and the support of staff. I got my first female suicidal client. Livermore Police Department called and asked if they could walk her next door. Everyone was out to lunch except for I had come back. And I immediately got assigned to her. The ambulance was waiting out in the parking lot. Police were on standby. My supervisor was involved. I spent 3.5 hours with her in a counseling room. She was extremely sad and said, if I walk out the door, I am going to harm myself. So my job was to find out her means, what her access was in her plan. It was very scary. I was like, man, and she was in good hands, but like being a newbie in it. I did a lot of listening, a lot of validation, a lot of normalizing, just let her talk. She had a sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse background. She was a mom, and I was able to call friends and with the help of friends and neighbors, get those things out of the house. They took possession of them, and she could not have those things back unless she asked and had people present to observe her. And with the help of her doctor, we reached out to her doctor, got them on the phone. So she was in front of me. Now I've had a suicide call on the crisis line 6 months ago, a fireman, not in our county, out of county in another state, saying he didn't want to bother his children and his wife anymore with what was going on. He came upon a traumatic accident on scene, and he was just super sad. He cried. He got mad. He screamed at me. It had nothing to do with me, but he screamed. I just allowed him space to do it. And then he'd cry, and then he was thankful, and then he'd cry again. And my best weapon has been a good positive weapon. Sorry, I'm saying it like that. That's my choice of word right now, was to listen, to validate, and to shift my tone, shift my response, and stayed on the line with him for off and on for 2.5 hours. And he actually recently called me and thanked me. So that was super cool. It can be very scary to be like, hold on and call your backup, or hold on and your manager's in the other room. So that, you know, we can get the police on the line. Where are you? You know, so we can get to you.
Let's talk about that, because I see, Sharon, we have the tools right there, but if we're thinking about just they're answering the line like in the middle of the night or on the weekend, so let's talk about what they could do, what things they're gonna have accessible to them.
So let's start, but I wanted to share that it's possible, doable, that you can do this. So here we go. So what is suicide? Suicide is when people harm themselves with the goal of ending their life, and they die as a result of it in most cases. Suicide attempts is when people harm themselves with the goal of ending their life, but they don't die. Suicidal thoughts are looping thoughts, so ongoing, repeated over and over, like the radio, like a song, like a movie, of harming their self and harming others. Brief means, so having the means is pills, rope, gun, knife, etc. And the plans are like day, time, location, possibly even practiced, but actually not followed through, to end their life, but they don't have plans to act on those thoughts due to a single or multiple reasons to live. When speaking to a family or a friend of a person who's committed suicide, or a survivor who survived a suicide attempt, the language they have changed and ask us to use the language you should use is died by suicide or survivor of a suicide attempt. Next slide. So these are the statistics I was able to get a hold of. I tried to see if I could get something in 2020 or 2021. I wasn't able to get them, but suicide rates by age in the world for 2019. So this is suicide rates are the number of deaths per suicide measured by 100,000 individuals in a given demographic. So it says 70 plus years or more. It says 24.53. Age bracket 50 through 69 years of age is 14.25. And age bracket of 15 years old to 49 years old is 11.19. All ages in general, they shared 9.81. And then ages, believe it or not, as young as 5 years old to 14 years old was 0.64. So hopefully they'll have more current stuff for us. So who's at risk for suicide? People of all gender, ages, and ethnicities. It does not, it doesn't care. It can affect anyone at any time. A history of past or current suicide attempts. So if you have a past attempt, meaning it could be 9 years ago, or it could have been last week, you're 5 times greater to attempt or commit suicide again. There's family history of suicide. So if you have walked in on a family member or interrupted a family member from actually going through with suicide, or you have heard someone talk about it, you could have a history. It puts you at greater risk for suicide or attempting suicide. depression or other mental health disorders or substance use disorders, chronic pain, back pain, neck pain. Maybe you had some leg injuries. Maybe you recently were paralyzed and you have phantom pain, those type of things. Having recently been released from jail or in prison, but also being in prison or in jail for a short period or a long period of time because you're away from others in connection, regular daily connection, and stressful life events. So a loss of a loved one, legal troubles, financial difficulties, breakups of a close friendship or romantic relationship, harassment, or being bullied. Next slide. Those who are more likely to experience depression or suicide symptoms, so those incarcerated or in mental hospitals, away from family and friends, confined to their cell or rooms for long periods of time. Isolation is huge and will cause thoughts of suicide or depression and even suicidal symptoms. Children, adolescents, dependent adults or elders, so those with a physical disability or intellectual disability, past or current sexual, physical, emotional, or financial abuse. Survivors of sexual assault, both male and females. Survivors of domestic violence, direct and indirect experiences, females, males, and children. So that's like witnessing or hearing it, not directly it being done to you. Diagnosis or undiagnosed mental illness, such as schizophrenic, bipolar, dissociative disorders. Most often, they said those who are linked to depression, who attempt suicide or have followed through with committing suicide. They shared that that most of them had and more than likely a underdiagnosed mental illness that was not treated or properly diagnosed, like misdiagnosed. And then specific occupations or communities, so first responders, someone who's homeless, LGBTQ plus community, my community as a therapist, doctors, police officers, etc. We're at high risk for that as well. Next slide. Warning signs of suicide. So just want to let you know that sometimes there isn't a warning sign. There's not of the obvious, but I would say 50% of the population. Here are some things research has shown or people have shared. So talking about wanting to kill themselves or die, talking about feeling empty, hopelessness, and loss of purpose in life. So feeling dark and hollow and everyone else is around you smiling and you're just trying to get through the minute, the hour, the day, the week. Talking about feeling trapped or there's no other solutions. So when the less protective factors that you have, you will probably experience that number 3 one I just read, versus if you had more, the less likely you would feel that way. Talking about being a burden to others. So maybe you lost your job and your car broke down and your girlfriend broke up with you, or boyfriend, or your roommates decided they no longer want to live with you. So just now you're living with your parents or your aunt, or couch surfing. So feeling like, I'm an added, problem to the person's life that I'm living with. Feelings of unbearable emotions or physical pain. So they physically hurt. They mentally hurt. It could look like from being tired to lack of energy, to actually, when you touch them, they put their clothing on, or someone goes to touch you, like pins and needles, I've heard, or just sensitive and just very painful touch. Withdrawn from family, friends, coworkers, and enjoyable activities. So maybe you were a runner and a biker, you did triathlons, or maybe you I don't know, went out every weekend and you visited tons of beaches, you did a beach weekend every week, that was your thing. And now you no longer find it fun anymore. Giving away possessions and saying goodbye to family and friends via email, via online, in person, in text. Putting affairs in order, such as a will or living trust, or writing out on a piece of paper who you want your things to go to, your animals to go to, your kids to go to. Participating in high-risk behaviors, which could lead to one's death. So some people get very promiscuous, sexually promiscuous, unprotected sex, or other things in that area. Substance abuse. So they're doing maybe heroin, cocaine, lacing marijuana multiple times a day versus twice a week. Jumping in and out from a train. So they're doing daredevil moves, driving at a fast speed on the highway, or, maybe out of car, and then they play chicken. And then talking or thinking about death often. Next slide. So here are some myths about suicide. Number one says suicide only affects individuals with mental health conditions. Fact is that many individuals with mental illness are not affected by suicidal thoughts, and not all people who attempt or die by suicide have mental illness. Number two says once an individual is suicidal, maybe I meant to say he or she will always, sorry about that, he or she will always remain suicidal. Fact is, active suicidal ideation is often short-term and situation-specific. Studies have shown that approximately 54% of individuals who have died by suicide did not have a diagnosable mental health disorder. Number three goes on to say most suicides happen suddenly and without warning. And the fact is, warning signs such as verbal and behaviorally precede most suicides. So you see it, they express it. We have two more. So number four says people who die by suicide. I hear this a lot on the crisis line when I take it, as well as in sessions and just by family and friends. People who die by suicide are selfish and take the easy way out. Fact is typically people do not die by suicide because they do not want to live. People die by suicide because they want to end their suffering. These individuals are suffering so deeply that they feel helpless and hopeless. That's a tough one to hear. The fact that, someone feels like this, for sure, without a doubt. I hear this quite a lot, more than I'd like. Number five, talking about suicide will lead to and encourage suicide. The fact is there is a widespread stigma associated with suicide, and as a result, many people are afraid to speak out about it. Talking about suicide not only reduces the stigma, but it also allows individuals to seek help, rethink their options, and share their stories with others. Next slide. So before I read this part, I'd like all of you to know that research shows that you asking someone open-ended questions around them expressing that they're suicidal, or maybe they're like, I'm depressed, and maybe they're having suicidal thoughts, but you're afraid to ask them or uncomfortable, because the first couple times can be uncomfortable until the more you do it. And hopefully you won't get a whole bunch of calls like this, but if you do, you can't put suicidal thoughts in someone's thinking. They're not going to go and commit suicide because you had this conversation. So do you have means? Do you have plans? Do you have access? It's not like they're going to write it down and they're actually, after they end the phone call with you, go commit suicide. Can you prevent suicide? You know, you can in some cases, they may already have their mindset even after you have been helpful to them and they've thanked you and everything. They might very well go and do that. So know that you having an open-ended conversation is not going to put thoughts of I'm going to commit suicide or she said, oh, a rope, or, you know, sitting in a car with carbon dioxide. Oh, you just gave them the opportunity to take that and go do that very thing after you end the call. So I just wanted to share that with you. I read that in a recent research in psychology today. So it was really good. Next slide. Oh, I haven't even done this one. Jump into next slide. Okay. Treatments of trauma, depression, and suicide. So everyone's journey through trauma will be different. But if left untreated, trauma can be complicated and halt the day-to-day living, create conflict in one's personal and professional relationship, and can pick up unhealthy habits such as substance or alcohol use. There are multiple available options for treatment. So if somebody would like resources, or, you know, if they want to make a list with you, these are some of the things that, you know, maybe you can put in the back of your mind if you ever get a call like this. So what would be helpful to one person is lifestyle changes. So healthy eating and sleeping habits, daily exercise, seeing loved ones on a regular basis, and practice self-care methods. So you don't have to do all of these all at once, but if you have poor eating habits, right, and you're not sleeping well and you're not hydrating, and you're, you know, isolated, that can be difficult. 2, individual psychotherapy and support groups. So being able to process and resolve emotions and thoughts that are keeping them stuck, and develop and practice coping skills and building, you know, their support system. That's huge. 3, in some cases, and this is most often as a last resort, but a psychiatrist support or medication. So telling them to reach out to their physician, telling them to have that medication taught to educate themselves, because if they were to have mental illness, therapy is just not going to help. They're going to need more, like a wraparound support. And then 4, utilizing and practicing coping skills when triggered by a situation or noticing internal cue changes. So that's practice again with help from others who are able to help them, so professionals. But you can also offer those or share those things that they can reach out to their own support people. Any questions? Any thoughts? I know that was a lot.
Well, I kind of agree with you, Sharon. The topic of suicide is I think it's the scariest for me to be able to handle, because I can't put myself in that, I guess, that hopelessness feeling or the finality of it all. So I would say that is on my mind, probably the scariest thing that I've heard. I just can't wrap myself around of trying to help someone when they're really thinking that they're going to commit suicide. It's scary. That's not a question, but just more of, I agree with you that's probably my biggest fear, I would say.
I'm right there with you. And even when I get those calls still, I get a little anxious and I have to slow my breathing down. It's almost like, you know, CPR first aid. I have 30 years under my belt, right? I've used it twice in my lifetime, and your tools are there and all of a sudden they go poof, right? And you're like, whoa. But then you remind yourself and you've got your book and you've got your handouts and you can, you know, you have to kind of regulate yourself so that you can be that sounding board. And if all you can do is listen and keep them talking, then you've done well.
I know that, you know, in my previous, with my previous employer, we used to have the Alameda crisis support. I think it was the suicide line. And they used to say that if you've received a call, it's somebody that's who's hopeful that you will somehow get them, either talk them out of it or connect them to something that will keep them from proceeding further. So the very fact that they haven't gone through the motions yet but they're talking is in itself a hopeful sign.
Yes.
But I know that my biggest fear is the call dropping, and that has happened. Because then, I know that I'm sure I will learn, what we do here at Tri-Valley Haven, but I know I would call 911 and say, I received a call from this number and it's dropped. Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's very important that we emphasize that. If you really feel that the caller, is on the line and they do have a plan, whether they let you know or not, but you really feel that they're going to, or you're just uncertain, call 911. A lot of the callers, like, Sharon works DV and SA, and I work, director of SA. So there might be calls that are, they're feeling depressed. They feel they have no way out, or they want to kill themselves, or, they're being molested by, their dad, or, they just got raped, while being at school, or had a mom, out with mom's group. And, when mom's walking home downtown Livermore and gets assaulted after doing this years with her friends, and, she just doesn't want to face her husband. She wants her life to end. So these are real stories. I mean, these are real, these are things that happen. But just to reiterate, if you feel that individual is going to harm themselves, and call 911. It's better to call than not call. You can help them come up with a plan. You obviously want to see if they're safe, who's around them, talk them down. Do they have any type of support? Who's in the next room? What time of day is it? If it's the nighttime, of course, it's probably a little more difficult. They feel a little bit more alone. But, if it's during the day, you're going to have all these resources, references, maybe different, we might be full, whatever capacity is to be able to take, a woman in that's trying to escape, flee her perpetrator. But there's other agencies we can help her with to give her hope. We want to be that little bit of hope if we feel we can when we're on the call. But if we feel like at that point it's too unsafe, then call 911. No one's a miracle worker. We just appreciate and just are so grateful that everybody wants to be part of, the Haven, whether you're volunteering or you're choosing to work here or not. I mean, we're all here for a reason, and everybody's hearts and minds are in the right place. But just know that, we all have certain limitations that if someone's mind's made up, that, at that point, we just want to try to keep them safe or try to help them be safe.
I have a question. So as Sharon shared, or as you confirmed that if we had a caller who was suicidal, and let's say we had them on the phone for about 45 minutes and the call does drop, when you tell us to call the police, is that supposed to just be a warning? Are we supposed to share like detailed information about the call? Isn't that supposed to be confidential? Like, how do we go about that?
Well, ideally, when you're getting a call from the crisis line, most times you're not going to be in the phone with somebody for 45 minutes. Unless you really feel it's a situation where you need to be. But like we said, we're crisis providing crisis counseling, right? We're not having a long counseling session. If that was needed, then we would help them, we connect them to even intake line. I would give them one of my advocates, whether it's DV or sexual assault advocates. You'll get calls you'll talk about later on. I don't know if it's when I present on military and detention centers. We'll get calls from Santa Rita jail. So you get a variety of callers. But if you ultimately feel it's unsafe, then call 911. And that's just like, even if you went to your therapist, if Sharon had a client, or I had a client that, is expressing that they're suicidal, and we feel it's unsafe, we would call, we would make sure they're safe, whether we have to get them court committed or not. But yeah, you wouldn't want to sit on the phone with someone if you really feel that they're suicidal for 45 minutes, unless you feel that they're calling for you because they just want to live, they have that hope. and they want someone to really talk them down, and you feel like they have support, if you feel like they're safe and there's someone around them, you know, like asking, like, who's around you, you know, and if they say, you know, let's just say they say it's my sister. Well, can I talk to your sister? You can do things like that. You know, let sister know. Is it okay if I talk to your sister? Yeah. Let sister know, you know, what she's feeling. Are you able to help her and support her at that point?
And if you report to the police, you just give them name and number and that you're concerned for their personal safety. And you don't have to give them any more information.
Okay, thank you.
And now this is for suicide. So we're not talking about if a caller calls and says, you know, they're, you know, and Sharon, you could talk on that, and I could talk a little bit on perpetrators, but you know, if their perp, regardless of what perp is there, you want to make sure that they're safe from the individual. So you don't want to give any information out because that's a safety for them. You know, that they're trying to keep them safe from themselves. It's safe from others. Does that make sense? Did I word that correctly? So that's a whole other issue, which I think I don't know if you've already had that. I'm looking at we've talked about
Might-
DV already.
Color. Maybe in
Okay.
types of colors you have it. I don't know.
Okay.
My screen's being kind of funny, so.
So Marissa and Sharon, I have a question for you. I know that there'll be situations where people actually will hurt themselves,
Yeah.
or have, you know, have
Self-mutilation.
been stabbed. I mean, I've worked with somebody that was stabbed, or will say, I'm going to jump, you know, I'm going to, you know, do you have a plan? Yes, I'm going to jump in front of a BART train. And then at that point, it's like, okay, I need to get law enforcement, and I need to tell them. And it becomes a really long call, because then law enforcement will start asking you to try to talk to the person to get them to describe what they're wearing, what they look like, what are they seeing, where are they at, to try and locate them. So I don't know how much information, you know, that's pretty typical, and we're allowed to give that information.
Well, I mean, having a suicide caller to that extent is not, it's far from, you know, it's not something that, thank goodness, doesn't happen all the time. Like hardly at all. But if you're talking to somebody on the phone, you know, and it's to that point where they're going to jump, of course, and you're going to be on the other phone, and you would give it information, you know, to help the police. You know, you wouldn't just give your name and hang up. You know, if you really know that they're right there and about to do it, but your gut's going to tell you what to do. I mean, I think for these kind of calls, we can go over what are some things we could all do, or what are some things that we would share we would do. But there's no really script as just some other calls. Like if this happens, these are the 3 choices you can make. You know, I think with suicide, it's just, we can only give you, you know, talk about like trauma and depression, and then talk about, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about, excuse me, different type of crisis line callers and self-care, and, you know, how self-care we also can encourage, you know, our callers to practice self-care. But as it pertains to, you know, it doesn't, thank goodness it doesn't happen. You know, it's a 24-hour crisis line. You know, it's not, there are suicide lines that people, you know, call just because they want to commit suicide, but, you know, you would know. And you always have your backups, and you'll see my information's on there. My personal cell phone's on every bit, because I'm the one who will reach out to all of you every month to see what shifts you want to take for the crisis line, or if you're going to take CERT calls. You'll actually be getting those emails from me, and my personal cell phone's on there. So if you ever come into a situation like that, I want to be called, and you're not going to bother me. But you're always going to have, you know, your backup. You're always going to have support. So don't ever feel like that you're just going to be thrown into this. You know, you'll have support there.
And as far as sharing your question, I had, you mostly get calls I have on depression, sexual assault, domestic violence, or today just sucks kind of calls, and then those chronic callers. But then I've had 2 suicidal calls, but only one that you're describing, or that you're asking the question to. I did ask the person where they were at. I asked what they were wearing, and then was using my cell phone to contact non-emergency, because the 911 line was busy. So I had better odds to do non-emergency, and so was able to say at least highway overpass. This is what they're telling me they're wearing. And I said, you need to get over there as soon as you can. And they were like on the phone with me. I took like a half hour, but normally it's like, I'm depressed, I'm sad. Knock on wood, there's not a lot of calls like this, but yes, when I did have to do description, location, luckily the person was willing to talk and tell me. You know, not like the movies, right? Or the stories on Dateline that you're like, the call dropped, right? And they're like, I'm not telling you, click. I've had drop calls, but not in this situation. But that was the extent of that one. And that was in 2019. And I haven't had one like that since, and hope to not have that. Hopefully no one ever has to experience that, but that's what I did.
I have a quick question that you might answer, I guess. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about with the types of callers, but so in a situation where you would be calling 911 or someone else, would the person on the phone, would they need to know that? Should they know that? Is that a case by case thing? Like, I'm going to be calling 911 on the other line. Like, how do you manage both? Do you like mute while you're calling 911?
I leave them on the phone, and I ask, can I call 911? Or I will say, in that instant, when that person was being suicidal, I am calling 911. Please stay on the line with me. He could easily have got off, but everything I did, I said, you're going to hear everything that I'm doing. And I wasn't going to not be in contact with that caller who was in distress. I mean, I guess you could put them on hold and call your backup, but I've had backup with the other person.
Okay.
Me needing resources, and I put them on hold too. Not suicide, but depression, anxiety, maybe sexual assault, fleeing a domestic violence situation, trying to get them into our women's shelter. Yeah, I've done backup.
Yeah. So, well, I guess not necessarily hold, but like muting so they can't hear you. Like, I was just wondering if there's like a protocol for that, if they're more likely to do something more extreme or sooner if they know you're calling someone versus not. So,
What do
but
you
We don't,
also-
there's no protocol. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
call by call. There is no written protocol.
Okay.
Okay. Should we take like a 5-minute break and then go home? And no, I'm just kidding. 5-minute break and then finish up
Sorry.
the types of crisis line callers and self-care to wrap it up. What time is it?
I don't
10
think we
minutes,
need a break
Meg?
unless you guys think we need a break. What do you think?
I'm fine either way, but I know this was a heavy topic. So if you would like to take like a 5-minute, I'm okay with it. But if you want us to keep going, I'm okay. Marissa, are you good?
I think
it's
it's
up to
good if
everybody.
people can take a break, and if anyone needs to go and come back, let them go and come back. We can wait.
Let's take 5. That's good.
Okay. See, what time is it? See you in 5 minutes. It's 8:58.
When we had the crisis call with the BART, when I had that call, the caller actually was at the BART station, and it was quite the call because we had to call the police, and then they called the BART police, and the BART police stopped the trains, and then we had to figure out where the person was at. And it was a big BART station, so they kept saying they were in the bathroom, and BART police, so we can't find them in the bathroom. And then I literally had to say, well, when you open the bathroom door, what do you see? What's right outside? When they described it, then the cop said, oh, this is the second floor, whatever bathroom. And they went up there and the person was in the bathroom. But that was like some call.
Thank goodness they found them.
Some call. But they ask quite a bit of detail, because they even asked, like, how does a person wear their hair? How old are they? What are they wearing? A lot of detail. Marissa, did you say your kids are 9?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
2 boys and 1 girl. Yeah.
They're cuties.
Cutie
I'm sure of
patooties.
that, but that's like a handful. That's with your hands full, huh?
I do.
They're super sweet. I've met them a couple times. They're cute.
Wait, are they all 9?
Yeah, they're triplets.
Oh, nice. I was gonna ask, are they like a package deal? Because adoptions are always super interesting.
Yeah. You never separate siblings. That's
Oh,
why
yeah,
there's
for
so many,
sure.
there's so many kids in orphanages.
Yeah, I get to talk
They're
funny
from-
about adoptions as an adopted person myself, so I was just
Hmm.
like, yeah, they some kind of package deal, because yeah, definitely you want to pick the good ones.
Yeah, they're from Bulgaria. I served over there for 2.5 years in the Peace Corps. So my kids are actually Roma. In America, we call them gypsies, which is really derogatory. Everybody always tell people in the States they don't know that, but they're Roma, but they're from Bulgaria. Even my cat's from Bulgaria. I met my husband there. It's like Oprah. I mean, I don't like Oprah, but she should pick our story up so she can pay for their college tuition. But luckily, they have dual citizenship, so hopefully they'll be able to go to college for free. Fingers crossed.
Is
So.
Bulgaria like your preferred living spot, considering you brought a whole family home with you, or?
No, it just seemed fitting. I mean, we lived there for 2.5 years. I served in the prisons, at-risk youth over there. I knew the language. We knew the culture. So we're the
Is that
pioneer
Slovakia?
family. In Bulgarian? No. So when you were I was in the Peace Corps. So you're sent to the country that needs whatever their focus is. So their focus in Bulgaria was at-risk youth and juveniles. I worked for juveniles for a long time, and sex offenders. So I kind of wanted to do it somewhere in a different country. They ended up stationing me in Bulgaria. Now you can choose where you want to go. And Bulgaria closed their gates from the US, so we can't go there anymore, except to visit. So yeah.
I know you don't like the word gypsies, but did you know they originated in India?
I do know that. I do know that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in Bulgaria, Romans are gypsies and they hate them because they live on the streets and they just steal and they beg and they live in ghettos or mahalas and they just hate them. So you see so many kids in the streets and, sad.
I know Bulgaria is kind of like a middle area for a lot of different cultures. Was there one that you came in contact with more, or just kind of you experienced a big melting pot? Or I know because it's kind of just in a central area.
No, there's not a melting pot there. It's Bulgarian or Roma or gypsies. Now, if you're near the Turkish border, then you would have Turks, depending upon the region of Bulgaria. But Bulgaria is not that big. I mean, you could drive across the country in probably less than 12 hours if you went straight across. We lived in a village. I love village life. I would love to stay in village life. Simple. It's hard coming back when you serve in other countries too. You see how much we really waste.
Do you live in the Bay Area, Marissa?
I do. Yeah. When we came back, I moved.
Move out and you'll feel it. I lived in the city of Alameda for almost 17 years.
I'm from Philly, so I didn't ever lived until we came back from Bulgaria. My husband's from San Jose. I have never been to California until that was 2013. I was shocked when I moved out here.
And I came from, a huge city, Delhi, and then my husband had been pushing, like, let's buy a home, and he wanted to buy a home and, closer to his family, which was all in San Joaquin, and we moved to Tracy, and it's another life. It's much more laid back within the city, driving, it's just a different life than the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain till you're actually living here. People are much more laid back. There are a lot of rural roads. There's still a lot of farms. You'll see people up with their honey stands and fresh fruit for the season, and it's lovely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We stay where we're at for the schools. So. But anyways, let's keep going. So, and everyone wants to go to bed, get home, cuddle up. Otherwise, we can talk one day. You can come over to the Rape Crisis Center, Sharon, and we can have tea and you can tell me about, before Tracy. I'd like to hear about it. I love learning about different cultures. Alrighty, let's move on. So how many do we have on here? Because we're going to talk about crisis line callers, and I have some scenarios. They're actually true scenarios that have happened to either myself or some of my other colleagues. So everyone's going to get one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Right? Am I miscounting?
Are you
'Cause my
giving them
screen's really-
each the individual one, or are we gonna?
Yeah, I'm
do it?
gonna give everybody each individual one.
Thank
And
you.
we're gonna work to, what we're gonna do is we're gonna work together. So I'm gonna give the crisis line scenario. And then you can share with us how, after I go through the PowerPoints, you can share with us how you would handle it. And then if anyone else has suggestions, we'll all chime in and support each other. So we're not feeling like so put
What
on
do you
the
think
spot.
about? So we only have 5. So what do you think about 5 or 6? Number 5 or 6?
1, 2, 12.
We did 13, 16.
Not 5 yet, because we haven't gotten that far in regards to like the cohort.
Okay. I get a lot of number 6 or similar.
All right, we can do number 6. We can do number 6. Let's start, we'll go through the PowerPoints and then we'll wrap up this portion with the scenarios. So our crisis line caller populations. And Sharon did these PowerPoints, so she deserves the credit. Excuse me for putting them together. And it actually is true. The first one is actually, I would pretty much think this is the biggest callers we get are from Santa Rita Jail or Dublin Prison. And we have a program called, it's called PREA, and it's from the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And what we do is with Santa Rita Jail and then federal prisons have different rules, but currently we have agreements with the jail and with Dublin Prison. And we have advocates that work with incarcerated survivors. Santa Rita Jail is male and female, and Dublin Prison is women, all women. And we provide crisis counseling, 3 to 5 sessions with those that have been assaulted, whether it's guard on inmate on inmate, or past trauma. And our advocates, like I said, provide 3 to 5 sessions. If they need ongoing counseling after that, then they'll be assigned a counselor, and they get between about 8 to 10 sessions. And then we also, and we just got the green light for this, that we are able to go in and we do similar to like art therapy groups. Some of you have maybe seen what is going on in the news, or what has gone in the news with Dublin Prison in regards to the warden, the chaplain, additional guards, how they were sexually assaulting the women. So we actually have a cleanup crew, and part of the cleanup crew that luckily all those horrible, abuse of power individuals that work there are no longer there. They're still under investigation, but it's very difficult now because you have so many incarcerated survivors, women there that don't trust anyone. And not only do they have past trauma, but all of the sexual trauma that they endured from those, even though they are inmates, that they don't, it shouldn't be something that they should have to endure. So those are our callers we get. And a lot of times they'll have repeat callers that call about the same things. And the mental health system, unfortunately it sucks in the prison and jail. So you'll get a lot of repeat callers. Some of the things we've tried to streamline, they'll call and say, when's my session with, I don't know, I'll use myself. When's my session with Marissa? So we've tried to put together, which that way we have it's part of on our drive, we could say, oh, you have a session with Marissa on such and such date. And these tools, all of you, when you're all done, I created I should have brought it with me. It's on my hard drive. But it's going to tell you if a caller from Santa Rita Jail says this is the step you do. If the incarcerated survivor says that they're being assaulted by another inmate, this is what you do. Sometimes they complain about the watch commander, this is what you do. So it's very specific, and there's 2 forms. There's one that was created for volunteers, and then there's one for for staff, because it's depending upon, the hours. So it's gonna be very helpful. Sam, I can send that to you, and you can email it to everyone. So then, you have a better understanding. SART survivors, I had mentioned this earlier. Some of you on here are going to choose just to do the crisis line, which is, we appreciate any help. And some of you will want to do the crisis line and also do SART calls. And I believe all of you visited Highland Hospital or part of that presentation last week, or not yet.
They
Yes, no?
they had the presenter, but they haven't been to the physical hospital yet. They won't until towards the end, possibly.
Right, so at the end, you'll have a tour with Dawn, and that'll be only if you're going to do SART calls. Because it's very specific. So SART survivors, you would be the one going out to Highland Hospital or Washington Hospital, and you would be supporting an individual, male or female, that is asked for an advocate because they just had been assaulted, whether it's through their forensic exam, just to hold their hand, just to listen, just to be, that's what you do when you advocate, or not advocate, but when you're there to support a SART survivor. So you'll get calls from the police station, or you'll get calls from the hospital requesting. Local police officers, like I said, requesting shelter space. The folks at the DV shelter are great at letting those handling the crisis line, letting everyone know, the next person, if they have any beds open, so that you'll know when you receive a call. If you need to find them another, outside resource where you would actually assist and help them go through, so that you can connect them to maybe possibly another shelter, or if we do have space. Local and out-state callers who are some type of crisis. If they're out of the Tri-Valley area, we still serve. However, if they're out of the Tri-Valley area and they're requesting openings, Sharon, you can talk about in that procedure. I can talk about if we have someone that was just assaulted and they're outside of the Tri-Valley area. Let's just say they were assaulted in San Francisco, the area, and I'm going to send this to you, Sam, the area that wherever the assault took place, that's where they need to go to, that SART hospital. Otherwise, if we send them, tell them to go to the hospitals that we work with, and the assault didn't happen in the Tri-Valley area, they will send them back to San Francisco and say, you have to take your exam. So it's a jurisdiction issue. I'm not even going to comment, if it's okay or not okay, because we could all go back and forth, but I'm just letting you know that's how it is. So I'm going to send you a list. Sam will send it out to you in a list where all the SART hospitals are. If you ever get a call or you ask them where they were assaulted, then you can let them know, go to this nearest hospital. They have a SART program where they'll have their own advocates from that area. Sharon, did you want to chime in about if you?
Yeah, so out-of-state callers who are fleeing a domestic violence situation has to be physically in one, California. Two, they have to be actually like in or within a certain area that they can get to us. So if they're in Texas and they're like, I'm fleeing right now, and it's probably going to take them 3 days because maybe they have a U-Haul with them, we can't hold a bed for anyone, period. But in order for us to help them, they have to be physically in the state of California and within a short period of distance from us, so that if we do have a mom +3, meaning a room for 4 people, a mom and 3 children, and they are pass an assessment. Well, I'm talking therapy, but there's another word. Sharon, what is the you guys do
Intake.
an intake. So if they're appropriate and they go through the intake, they can bring them in. But we can't help, we can't save a bed for somebody, whether they're in California or outside of California. So if the person's calling them in Oregon and they it's going to take them 6 hours to get to us. And another call comes in for a mom +3. It's first come, first serve, and who's appropriate. As far as counseling, just real quick, you can give them our intake line, but the person has to be in the state of California, because my license and Olga's license and future counselor's license are only can support and provide counseling services in the state of California. It's illegal and unethical for us to help someone outside of the state of California. We can help on the crisis line because it's different. There's exceptions, but it's actually them physically coming to, to see us, like telehealth online. I can't see somebody in Texas or Hawaii or even New York. So just wanted to share that.
Chronic callers, daily, monthly, multiple times a day, repeated stories. Unfortunately, a lot of times is mental health issues. Inappropriate callers, verbal abuse, those who masturbate. Don't feel uncomfortable calling them out. It's going to happen. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. It's going to happen, and we'll have a role play about it. You could just tell them, don't be, you're being inappropriate. If you have a crisis to talk, this is a crisis line. You want to talk about you're having a crisis, okay, we can talk about it. But if you're going to sit on here and masturbate, or you're not wasting my time, but you're taking away important time, there is somebody in a crisis. Because remember, sometimes when we have callers trying to get through the crisis line, they can't get through. They're going to have to keep calling back. So they're holding up the line, by masturbating. That's not that's the services we provide. And don't feel like you can't just tell them to stop calling. You can tell them, please stop calling. Hang up calls and 211. And we get calls from there as well. Let's see, I'm this so I can't see.
And for
And they
those who
are
are
other
those who are verbally abusive, you can ask them to stop. And if they continue, you can say, I'm ending this call, or you can just hang up. I'm letting you know. I've done it. Everyone's done it. I mean, you can only give them so many chances, and you need to take care of yourself. So if they can't stop, then you have permission to end the call or hang up.
So where are you, Sharon? Okay.
I'm here.
This is
I'm
your
here.
topic. Yeah, your topic's next, right? Before we wrap this up.
Okay, are we gonna do the crisis line scenarios after I do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or do you want me to
So-
keep going into this? No, I could do the crisis line now. I could do the crisis line and go right into this. We'll tie it in.
Sure, whatever that's fine.
Because I don't have this printed out. That's why I'm
Do
okay.
you want me
Let's
to
do
this
that.
then? I'll do it.
Yeah, do
Sounds
this, and then we'll do crisis line scenarios. That'll be good. And then we'll
Okay.
wrap it up with self-care.
Okay. How can you support sexual assault or domestic violence survivors? Next slide. So ways to be supportive to those experiencing a crisis or in distress. So here the phone rings, whatever, if you want to say good morning, crisis line, everyone does it different. I do good morning, Tri-Valley Haven crisis line, or I'll just go right into crisis line, just depending on the situation. But being present as you listen, and praise the caller for calling and reaching out to us. Because they'll be like, I didn't know what to do. I just picked up the phone and I heard your voice. And you're like, I am glad that, you picked up that phone, and I'm glad I could be helping you right now. Reflect back what the caller has shared, or ask how you can be of support. So often people don't think you're listening. So sometimes them saying, I've been feeling really lonely lately and it sucks. And I said, yeah, I bet that, you feeling lonely does suck. You just match them right back with their. Can you hear me okay? My computer is screaming.
I can hear you.
Okay. You're gonna validate and normalize emotions and thoughts of the caller. If it's extremely
You're muted.
Sorry, that
Voice
was
is
me. I was
reverberating.
trying to mute Marissa because I think you guys are close enough that your mics are interfering.
Okay. How am I now?
You're fine. Sam, we're in totally different rooms. We're not even near each other.
Okay, my apologies, everyone. So validate and normalize emotions and thoughts of callers if they're being appropriate, if it's easy to follow. If they're off the wall and all over the place, you can just listen or you don't necessarily, I hear you say that, or yeah, I could see how that is. But if it's like a little too much for you, you can just be a really good listener and be empathetic. So mindful of your tone of voice, the way you speak and the way you respond. Sometimes there's going to be hiccups if you're using cell phones. Maybe you have a bad connection, but try your best. You may want them to, depending on the situation, hang up and call back, but that's rare. But sometimes you do have to have them do that. Do not be afraid to ask open-ended questions around the crisis. So that way, like, you have a better understanding so that you can follow them. And if you find that you're having a difficult time understanding the situation, slow them down and say, can I pause, have you pause real quick, or have you stop just real quick? So what you're trying to tell me is, because sometimes they're just going super fast, or they're trying to process it, right, as they say it, and it's not coming out the way they would like it. So it's okay to slow them down or pause them, so that you can follow them and help them. And you can refocus the caller. So if they're talking really fast, or they're going about my mom and then my child and my car and my work, you can say, okay, so let's slow down. Let's take a deep breath. Not always do you want to take a deep breath, but in some cases you can. Or let me slow you down. Let's take a pause and let's talk about your mom, or what's upsetting you the most right now. And then we can talk about those little things. So it's okay to do that. Utilizing coping skills for those who are emotionally dysregulated. So crying, maybe angry, maybe just expressing sadness to help them self-regulate. So what do you do when this usually happens? They may very much tell you, I have no clue what to do, so I'm calling you. And you're like, okay, I'm glad you called. Well, you know what? Would you like some suggestions, or would you like to make a list? And, this, sometimes works for me, or I have a friend that does this. You can pull those little things in, just to be careful how much. And then if you feel like nothing seems to be helpful, or they are like, you're not understanding, or never mind, I feel like you're not listening. And that will happen once in a while if they're under the influence of something, if there's mental illness involved, if there's a lot of distractions around them. That's when you can just be a listener. Kind of a thing. And if there's other things you think that are not on here that you think might be helpful, go for it. Next slide.
Okay.
That's it.
So before we go into self-care, let's go through a couple scenarios. All right. So who would like to be the first volunteer tonight?
I can
All
go.
right. I see a hand up top. Okay. All right. You ready for your call? Okay. It's a ding, ding, ding. So the caller calls and says, I think I might be depressed. I can't get out of bed and I spend all day crying and I hate my life. My friends told me to go to the doctor and I did, but he said he thought I wasn't seriously depressed. And I just had to pull myself together. So I guess I'm just being a big baby, but I don't know what to do anymore. Sharon?
Oh, so I'd say, okay, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? I'm sorry to hear you're feeling that way. Was there something that happened? I mean, I'm not sure yet whether we start off, because, I haven't taken the crisis line, but maybe getting an understanding of the person's age. Are they in school? Is it a bullying situation? trying to figure out what it is, because if they're younger than them, it might be about is there something happening at school? So were your parents informed of this, and have they been, trying to get an understanding of whether the parents are supportive or whether this kid's feeling like they're out there on their own. If it's somebody that's older or it's happening at work, maybe it requires some sort of legal intervention, and that might make the person feel more empowered. Like, you could reach out to these agencies that can help with labor law. So really trying to get a sense of what's triggering this person's emotions. I don't know if I'm answering the question in the manner in which you want me to.
You are. It's good because you can't.
Yeah.
You're definitely pointing in the right view.
So I would I'd really want to know what's going on here, and who are you? Because I think it would have to be age appropriate to some degree. If it was somebody who's coming in, growing, as a teen, and they're kind of in that sphere where they're coming into understanding their sexuality or perhaps coming out, there are groups that can help with that, so they don't have to feel isolated with it. It's really understanding what the issue is.
Okay. Gaining understanding.
Yeah.
Great. Who's next? Christine, you want to go try next?
Sure, let's go.
All right. So this is one that happens more than once, more than a couple times. So let's say this person is hardly talking on the phone, but crying hysterically. You can't get each or any of these pieces of information out of them gradually, even over it's been 10 minutes or so. So what would you do? So it's been 10 minutes and they're still crying, and you can't get a word. They just keep crying.
Oh, well, I try to interject myself and say, you know what, can we maybe try and taking a deep breath? Yes. Probably maybe talking a little bit louder and saying, I'm here to help you. Is there something, let's try and figure this out. Or I'm assuming that, you can't yell at them. So you want to get their attention, but you want to be in kind of a nice way, but you have to be a little bit more direct, a little bit louder. And I would just keep on asking them, I'm still here. Are you ready to talk yet? I'll be here for you. Let's
right there. There you go. Great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here when you're ready. Good. I'm here when you're ready. I'm still here. Yeah. Because that will help to calm down. Good. Great. Okay. Who do we have next? Who would like to go next? My screen's all crazy. Anson, you want to go ready? Want to go next?
Sure, I can give it a shot.
All right, let's see. Okay. So, okay. So inmate from Santa Rita calls and asks for assistance with breathing exercises because they have such I can't talk right now, because they have their anxiety, they're having a panic attack or an anxiety attack. Can you help me with some breathing exercises?
I actually don't really know how to respond to that one. Yes, I can give it a go. I would maybe ask them a bit about their situation if they're in a state to talk about it.
No, I want you to do breathing exercises with me.
I guess I'm not sure what that means.
I'm having anxiety. Can you help me to calm down through breathing?
So breathing in and breathing out.
Okay.
And in some cases,
you're gonna keep breathing in, breathing out, and he's gonna keep wanking in, wanking out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes. So we have
this for sounds of masturbation or whatnot. That's
Yeah, so we don't do breathing exercises, period, so we don't even have to, assume or not assume that they are. We tell them we'd like them to straight up, but we're not gonna do breathing exercise with you. There's other coping mechanisms they can use. We've given them, other resources, coloring pages, they can talk about, why are they having such anxiety? Is there anywhere, within their cell, can they look out the window? What else? Is there a particular blanket or something that makes them feel a little comfortable? But we don't do, during COVID, there were a lot of calls from Santa Rita asking for, and actually there was, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, there were so many calls that week. We're here now, really, like the city, so the Jews will chime in on each other. If they get any of you to even do a breathing exercise, once they hang up, they're gonna be another person to the party, another person.
Marissa, I'm not too clear.
Oh,
It's reverberating.
is this any better? Ooh. Charlie Haven needs to get me a new laptop. So anyways, I don't know how much you heard. It's pretty new. We don't do breathing exercises just because of that reason, that it happens too frequently where the crisis line is being misused for someone is really having anxiety. So, helping them feel grounded, be aware of their surroundings, getting them to the present. Those types of things that we would use. And Anson, how you're responding, like you would know, or you want to do a lot of those going through volunteer training, they wouldn't know either what to do. But to solve problems, we don't do breathing at all anymore, breathing exercises. Anyone have questions about that? No, okay. Who's next? Let's keep it moving. Who would like to go next? Elizabeth, would you like to go next?
Sure.
Max, sure, okay. So let's see, okay. I'm gay and 15 years old. My parents would totally disown me if they find out. I don't have any friends, anyone I could live with, and no way to support myself. I'm still in high school and I'm being bullied. My only friend is another gay kid, but he's out. My parents have told me I have to stop seeing him.
Now this one is hard, and oh my gosh, okay. Well, I would obviously tell them, that they called, that I'm glad that they called, that this is a safe place for them to talk and to be open and to get support. If they wanted to speak more about the bullying, I feel like that would be something I felt comfortable kind of supporting them with. It's so hard with family stuff because there's just so many layers there, and it's so hard and it's so hurtful. And as a minor, I'm not really sure what I could do for them. So that would definitely, I'm glad that actually this question came up, because now I am thinking I'm not sure how I would.
So you answered your own question. You didn't know you answered your own question. So we are a crisis line. We're not a crisis counseling service, meaning this young, doesn't say they, them, he, her, we don't know what his pronoun is or their pronoun. They're calling you because as of right now, remember, we also provide resources.
Right.
So in addition to your resources, there would be LGBTQ plus groups that possibly he could join, support groups, or, so these are the type of things that you could ask, how could I help support you right now? Because it is a crisis hotline. So we don't want to be on there providing counseling or be on there a long time, because there could be another crisis waiting to come through the line. So always think that we help with the crisis, move the crisis, move on, give them resources, and just keep, going through to try to help. Now, if it's something someone needs more time, obviously we're not going to rush them off the phone, because that's been an issue too. We're not going to do that. But the more you get comfortable with the crisis line, you'll see, who needs more time, what call needs more time, and what call, you kind of can give them the resources, a little bit of the support, appreciation, took guts to call, and here's some, where they can better support you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that that's something I kind of had, not that I thought I was becoming a counselor, but that, that is the point, right? It's crisis. And if a good question to keep to kind of maintain that
Always
is like,
keep
are
it-
they in crisis right now? Or is this something that I can give them resources to, because it's beyond my scope. So that's
It's
a
not
really
just
good
you.
point.
Yeah, I've had to remind my team, and those on my team even before, that we provide crisis counseling. We're not counselors unless you
Mhm.
are a counselor. So yeah, it's hard because you want to problem solve, right?
Mhm.
Just part of us, especially in the helping field, whether you're volunteering or you're working here, you're here because you want to help. So it's a
Mhm.
natural thing to want to help. Okay, good. All right. Who else do we have? Max, are you there?
Yeah, what's up?
All right. Let's see. Which one do we still have? Are you, did I have any? Wait, no. I have two more, right, Sharon?
Yes, I'm keeping myself muted so we don't buzz. We have 12 and 13.
Okay, all right. Let me see. Okay.
Or we can.
All right,
change.
I'll give you 12. Okay, so Max, okay. I had an abortion because my boyfriend was gonna break up with me if I didn't, and now I'm depressed and suicidal, and I want to talk to people, but can't because it's a secret. I can't let anybody know or my family know I had an abortion.
I would probably, like everyone's been saying, tell her that it is, it's courageous to have reached out in the first place. It is, obviously a very difficult situation, regardless of whether it's her decision or not her decision or any external factors. That kind of thing is very difficult. And, and definitely like I hear you rather than I understand. Obviously, I can't be in those shoes. But I would certainly, if again, like the previous one, if I had resources at my disposal, I would try to reach out to those. If I imagine there's probably some kind of, anonymous group potentially for individuals in this situation or in similar situations. If there is, then I would want to refer or at least let them know that those kinds of things are out there. But yeah, just sort of, help them build up. While understanding that it takes some time. It's not a very quick thing to recover from, emotionally, and then yeah, just try to provide those kind of resources if I have them at my disposal.
Good, and just make sure that when she suggested that she's suicidal, is that she just saying she's feeling like this, or is it really a plan? Does she have a plan in place?
Oh, sorry,
And
I
who's
missed that part.
around? Yeah, that's okay. And just let everybody know, like, I'm really direct too when I do interviews. We are we're an organization that we do support and advocate for individuals, young ladies, women that do want abortions. And I will ask in an interview if you are pro-choice or pro-life, and we are not pro-life, we are a pro-choice organization. So that's not a question that I ask sometimes, because if you're not comfortable with being, with the fact that we are pro-choice and you feel that your views, or you're pro-life, it's probably going to be very difficult to handle some of the calls and support some of any of the ladies that, have had an abortions or consider abortions. I just wanted to bring that up. Last but not least, I think the other question is kind of, okay. Anais,
Anais.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
I just got raped.
Thank you so much for calling and for having the courage to, call and disclose this information. I know that it's not easy for you to just pick up the phone and tell me, such traumatic experience that you've just been through.
I just got raped.
Mhm. Oh my God, that is so hard. I guess I would ask if they have decided or if they have made the decision to go into the hospital, or if they've filed a police report, or if they're in a safe space. That's probably something I would ask first before we
Good.
continue. I'd like to ask, are you in a
Good.
safe space to hold this conversation? And if
Good.
they say yes, then I would proceed with how long, oh, well, just now. And then I would ask if they wanted to file a police report, and if they said no, then I would proceed to asking if they wanted to get a physical examination done at a hospital. Or how
Well, we
would
would ask, we would go, so this is, once you know the answer, this will, it's horrible to hear if
Mhm,
someone was to call.
mhm,
But we work with, and you had the virtual meeting with Highland Hospital. So we work with Highland Hospital in Oakland, and
mhm,
we work with Washington Hospital, County Hospital in Fremont. So
mhm,
if an individual was to call and say that they were raped, or sometime we've had parents call and saying their child or daughter or whatnot was raped, and we would recommend,
mhm,
would you like to go to the hospital? We can set an advocate there to
mhm,
help support you. And these are the two hospitals that we work with. And then also the person that we also work with, the Livermore, Dublin, and Pleasanton Police. So
mhm.
if they're calling, because we work with those police, at this point, forgive me, because we work with those in the Tri-Valley area, then we could also send an advocate there to meet that individual there to help support them through that process of if they wanted to file a police report or not.
And
So it's very,
I have a question. Sorry, I'm not in a quiet. It's okay. Wouldn't we technically have to ask where the crime was committed, or where they were raped? Because depending on which jurisdiction that they're in,
Right.
what county, they would need to go to that location. So let's say they were out of Alameda County and they
Right.
call and say, hey, I was just raped. Isn't that something we would need to clarify? Because technically, from
Right, it
my
would have to-
understanding, if it's outside of Alameda County, Highland or Fremont, we're not able to assist them because the crime was done outside of the county, correct?
right, which I'm gonna send everybody a listing of what SART hospitals serve wherever the assault took place. We'll
Mhm,
have the listing of what
Uh-huh.
hospitals you would tell the individual to go to. Of
Okay.
course, any hospital will take you, but the forensic exams, it'll take longer because they don't do SART specific hospitals. Hospitals that have SART specific programs,
Mhm,
everything's there. The PA that does the exam, they specialize in doing forensic exams.
Mhm.
The nurses that are there, they specialize. So it's very, and when you take a tour, if you choose to do SART calls,
Mhm.
you'll be amazed at how the department is just like a little off by itself. It's more comforting for a survivor. But you are right, it has to be in the jurisdiction. So we want to make sure when they call, we don't need to ask details unless they want to share details.
Mhm.
But if they do want to go to the hospital, let them know these are the hospitals we work with and ask where it took
Mhm.
place.
Okay.
But you did right by the first thing, asking if they're safe. You want to make sure that they're safe. Okay, great. Did I give everyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had
Alright.
a question on that one. So you're saying that obviously if they can't go to those two hospitals, Highland or the one in Fremont, the things that they could still go to their local hospital and they will still be able to get a rape forensic exam, or no?
They
Is,
get exam, it's a different exam. They're not going to have everything that they need to do a forensic exam. There's two types of exams, which we won't go into now because it'll
Okay.
take.
Mhm, yeah, no worries.
Yeah, which I don't know. Did you guys go into? She didn't go into that. when you did the Highland start?
Oh, she did. I just didn't know if, like, for example, like if this person was raped and the Highland Hospital isn't very close to them, the most important thing, I guess, is to get care, right? So I mean, but I understand that if they want to report, they probably need the forensic exam and
And
so I just,
unfortunately,
you know,
if they would go to the wrong hospital and the detectives are part of it and they were involved, they would take that individual and bring them to the hospital that's in their jurisdiction.
okay. Mhm.
And I've had that situation happen, and it's not fun for the survivor at all. But it's because the police pay for the exams. It comes out of their budget.
Oh, okay.
So, we don't need to talk and show
No.
it that. That's the real reason why. That's the reason why it's out of their budget.
Mhm.
So they're going to bring them to the hospital so that jurisdiction can pay for it.
Okay, thank you.
So, you're welcome. All right, let's close it up with self-care. Oh, that's me. All right, sorry. All right. So I always have to watch. I'm really bad at self-care, so I'll be honest with
I
you.
can do it if you want, if you'd like.
Oh, no, I'm talking about me personally with self-care. I'm not everyone's especially in my field, I should practice a lot of self-care, but I don't. Everyone laughs. I'm like, well, as much as I love working, I work a lot, and then I have triplets and my husband, and I have another job. It's like self-care is probably, I don't know, podcast. I love podcasts. So when I drive home, I have like 45-minute drive. Sometimes I take the back roads. That's my self-care, because I love podcasts. So why self-care is so important, especially in this field of work? It's the practice, protecting your own well-being. It's something we can do daily, weekly, or monthly. And we could go around and talk about and share, what are some of the ways, that we do practice self-care. Because as we know, when we're burned out, we're not doing anyone else, any good. We're not being able to support or provide care or, bring even happiness, if we're overly stressed, or especially when we have days and some of the calls that you might endure in a shift, it might be heavy, and so we got to make sure we take care of ourselves. What self-care might look like, asking for help, spending time alone, putting yourself first, asking for what you need, setting boundaries, staying at home, saying no, which is okay. I think sometimes, you feel bad if you say no. We have to be able to say no. We have to be able to we can only, stretch ourselves too far. Forgiving yourself, taking a step back, and not putting so much on yourselves. So before we go into resources, and this is I think there's 2 slides. Sharon put a bunch of amazing resources that you could send those out too, if those would be helpful. Why don't we go
Actually, Sam,
around?
can send them to Sam.
Okay.
Or maybe Sam can send them out to me.
So let's what is it, 9:47? Good, we're on perfect time. So we have about 10 more minutes. So why don't we close out? And one is if you want to share how you're feeling emotionally. Or 2, what does self-care look like to you? And I think also, Sharon, you sent Sam had sent out some coping skills, an attachment earlier. So let's just go around and check, kind of check out for the night, see how we're feeling, how do you practice self-care? Maybe you want to share something that might help somebody else in the group. And I just want to say thank you. You just met us tonight, and you shared, and you're here, and trainings, doing these volunteer trainings, it's definitely a commitment, especially 70 hours after working all day and enduring all the things you do all day, and then coming here and having to hear heavy things, but it's for the greater good to help somebody else to be able to do what we're doing. It's like a cycle. And sometimes our cycle of what we went through is so we can help others to keep cycling. and depending on each other, So let's close out. Sam, thank you for being here. So Sam, how are you feeling? How about you close us out? What are some self-care? What are you going to self-care?
Yeah, so oh, I know. I have this favorite electric blanket. And my room is facing like towards a street, so it tends to get really cold at night. So that'll be me all snuggled up.
Nice. I like that.
Mhm.
Let's see.
I'll go next.
Okay.
At work for self-care, I will either sit on the back of my tailgate of my truck and have lunch, or if I can't get out to my truck, just depends. I have a new diffuser, like an oil diffuser, and I'll put different smells and do that and have lunch. But at home, I'll go for a walk with a friend or close myself in my room and have some quiet time because I'm with people all day. And tell my kids to, give me a half hour, or make my favorite like treat drink. So
This would be, I'd say if I had to choose self-care, these are my cuties. I don't know if you guys can see them. Probably not a good picture, but those are my little cuties. Elizabeth, do you want to, I have you next, kind of in a circle. If I look at my screen in a circle.
Sure. So self-care is something I never, ever used to do. And now it's something that like I do pretty much like all day, every day. So self-care for me is like I try to infuse it into everything that I'm doing, as opposed to like putting pressure on myself to like incorporate some big self-care project or something. Like that can feel for me kind of daunting and overwhelming. So if I'm, like in the mornings before I pick up my phone, my son comes in and the dog comes in and we lay, and my son tells me about his dreams or like what he's been working on in his room, because he gets up so early. So he's always doing art projects or whatever. So we have our little chat, our little time, and then we go downstairs and I kind of make a morning ritual out of making my coffee. I turn on a song and I kind of dance around and I add my little tinctures and all my things. And it's like, everyone makes fun of me because I make super bougie coffee, but it's my thing. It's like, yeah, I'll post on social media and everyone's like, what's in your coffee today? So it's just always changing. So I just try and make mundane feeling tasks like more pleasurable and fun. So those are just a couple examples, but I try to do that with as much as I can all the time. So that
I like that.
Yeah.
That's
that's
great.
good.
That's great. All right, Max, I see you next to my circle. The circle of circles.
I don't really practice self-care, to be quite honest. It's not very healthy, but I don't know. I don't feel like my days are that difficult that they require self-care at the end of them. They're very routine. I maintain a routine. That's my self-care. And then when I meet my routine, then I do it again the next day.
What happens if you go out of your routine? Do you have any things to help you get you back to routine?
No, I mean, it's not really I'm not like super, I wouldn't say I'm super routine oriented, I guess, but it's just, I don't know. I'm just kind of always at a like central point that it's like not difficult to not deviate from. So I don't know. There's not really no healthy self-care for me.
At least you don't have any unhealthy self-care,
True.
So-
It's yeah, you take the good with the bad.
Thank you. Okay, Anson?
Yeah, I mainly do exercise, hit the gym, climbing outside, time with friends, things like that. Ways of unplugging, unwinding, getting away from the computer.
Very true.
Yep. Not much else to
Team?
add, sorry.
I would say I like to wake up before anybody else in my household just to have coffee and then focus for the day before the day gets away from me. I would say exercise, and for sure on the weekends, wine. That's good, right? Yeah, that relaxes me with my husband. So
Good.
Nice.
I agree.
I can't see. Let's see. Is Annalise, did she go?
No, but I can go.
I have my chat. I have my chat open.
Let's see. Today actually, I love plants. I've been wanting to start a garden, and I had a few plants that needed to be repotted today, and I've kind of been pushing it off for a while, but I did that today and it was really peaceful.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how therapeutic it was. I just felt so grounded, like with my hands in the soil. I felt like very free.
I agree. I love plants. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's true. Thank you. And Sharon, you're the last but not least.
I like a lot of different things. I love music. I pretty much love every kind of music there is. I can't say I'm a big fan of rap, but I grew up with Santana, and I love Dire Straits, and I love the Beatles, and I love, who else do I love? Lots of singers, and I love Frank Sinatra. So I love jazz. I love dancing. My dad was a great dancer, so that was something that's just, I guess, a part of my childhood. I love the cha-cha. Love reading, love art, like to dabble in sculpture, love gardening. So yeah, whatever takes my fancy. And I love my cats. And of course, I love spending time with family. So whatever takes my fancy, whatever's needed.
Right. Marissa.
That's about really practice much. I mean, we're big hikers. We're a huge hiking family, but I broke my foot, so I've been in this darn boot cast for weeks. I love plants, so many plants in my apartment, but self-care tonight would be probably listening to NPR all the way home. I miss the daily, I miss the post, so I'll be listening to those when I go home. But yeah. But okay, I appreciate everybody. I don't know if anyone has any closing comments. Otherwise, I wish everyone a good night. Sam, do you have anything you want to say? What's today? Today's Thursday, right?
So yeah, I just have the survey. If you guys can go ahead and fill that out, and then you're all set.
Do I do it too?
No.
Okay. That would be a little. But thank you to everyone, and it was a good first experience. I will get better and better.
Thank you, ladies. Talk to you tomorrow, Sharon.
All right, I will talk to you tomorrow.
Night, Max.
Good night.
Sorry, I should be as
Sleep well,
fast as
everyone.
everybody else on this.
No, take your. You're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
Have
did
a good
great.
one.
Have a good night.
Welcome. We'll see you ladies next week.
And
I want to hear all about it, Sharon, tomorrow. Are you
Sorry?
in tomorrow? Are you in tomorrow?
me?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm in tomorrow. You did a great job.
Thank you. I'll
Excellent
see you at
training.
8:30.
You and Marissa.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Samantha, for all your help in maneuvering my hiccups. You made us look awesome. Thank you.
No problem. I'll upload it later so you can kind of see yourself.
Oh gosh.
If only if you want. And then I'll post the poll results on the Google Drive.
Okay.
And that's it. So you
Well, thank
did
you for
it,
your
Sharon.
help.
You did it.
Ah, thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it.
Own it, Sharon, own it. I used to tell Carolyn when Carolyn used to do her, and she'd always put like, well, this is what so-and-so, like, stop telling everyone that. They don't know that. Just own it. You did a good job. Don't let them know that it's your first time.
I figured mine as well. But I won't do it again. I'll get better and better. So it's
There you go.
easier one-on-one or in a smaller group, meaning like face-to-face for me.
This
can
is
just
tiny.
do-
Sam, I
do
know
my
you want to,
plain
Sam, I
thing.
know you need to go. Does everyone keep their cameras? Do they generally always keep their cameras off? Those that did?
So we did explain at the beginning that we would like them to keep their cameras on. For the most part, like we do have a few that consistently keep it on. But I noticed that, and I did speak with some of the people that have their cameras off and why, and I was like, okay, because some people were kind of getting triggered on certain teaching days. So
Right.
I would say the people who show it and the people who don't show it are consistent in what they do.
Got it.
Yeah. Good to know, because next week it'll be a tough one. It's just, I don't know. I always had rules when I used to teach, like, I understand it triggers stuff, but sometimes we gotta work through those things, and then it's not fair if other people are sharing and they have their cameras off too, because you don't know who's in the background.
Right.
It's kind of like sharing if you run a therapy group and you have the door open, anyone can walk by.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah,
No.
I get it.
But we can't, you can't force on that.
No, but in my DV group too, I need you to have video on because if the abuser's in the room or there's someone you're doing or someone's doing something inappropriate to you, because that happens on video. I need to be able to, make sure that my group is running how it should run and be appropriate and safe,
But there's rules too when you have a group that we can, Sam, you want to go? There's rules in the DV group
There
you
is
can
rules.
go out for, right? An essay group, I could kick them out here, but really, we can't, what are we gonna say? Like, unless someone's like going buck wild and cursing,
Right.
yelling,
Can't put them on a
disrespect.
timeout or anything,
Right.
Alriady,
For the most part, they're
thank you
pretty
again.
interactive and
yeah.
they listen and have.
We're just curious what they look like. If that other gentleman,
I
is
am
he Anson? Is he young, older?
I think he's like 30.
Is he the lawyer or no? What happened to the lawyer?
No, Lacey's uncle's the lawyer, and right now
Yeah.
he's on a big case. So he's missed like the last couple sessions and he's only gonna do legal clinic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Anais, her name
Anais.
on East.
Is she staff? She's a new staff,
staff.
right? Or no?
She's in Sojourner. She does linkages.
She's been with us a couple months now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. She'll pop in on occasions at Shiloh and she'll go, hi. I mean, she's doing stuff and I'm going in a session. So we haven't really, hey, how are you? Like, come to lunch. We should probably have a staff lunch or a brown bag within reason, but outside.
Alrighty. Well, I'm out.
Alright.
Sharon, if you need me, I have a lot of, if I told the other girls, call me on my, so I'm probably not gonna be online much because I have so much flex time. So, but I'm still gonna be checking emails and such, but call myself if
Okay.
you need anything.
You want me to, while you're right there, because we're in separate rooms, do you want me to come your way and we walk out together? Or are you going to unlock me and go out this way?
I can let you out that way. Yeah.
Okay.
I can let you out that way.
And again,
Yeah.
Samantha, thank you so much.
Of
for
course, you
being our
did
brain and
great.
running this because it made my anxiety a little less.
Oh,
So
good,
thank you.
good. All right.
All right, you have a good night.